Hey guys, what's up? We're back. It is November. Suddenly, all of a sudden, I don't know how that happened. October, October seemed really slow, and then like the last week of October blew by for me. Like I found October very slow, and um,
Mm.
I was trying to watch a lot of horror movies and stuff, and I was doing the build, and then when you hit about the 20th, and I like the 20th through the rest of the month is kind of a blur for me, and now suddenly we're into like the second week of November, and unfortunately, we didn't get a show before the end of October. But we're back for November, and we're back with a somewhat familiar territory in that this is, I think, our fourth episode doing covering a film by David Cronenberg because he's a big favorite of ours. Because we did The Brood, and we did Dead Ringers,
Dead Ringers.
and we also did, I think, my favorite. I kind of waver back and forth, but I think my favorite Cronenberg is usually Videodrome, and we did Videodrome.
Okay, I forgot about Videodrome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've done all those, although it's been a couple years since then. So I don't think
Oh,
it's too big of a deal that we're trotting out another. Oh, there is a beautiful Blu-ray. Is that Criterion?
yeah, it's Criterion. That's blame me, guys. I kind of twisted Cole's arm, but I don't have to do it. I don't have
In
to
a
twist
way,
it too
though,
hard.
yeah. I mean, I know we talked about his career every time we did the movies, and I was always really sort of lukewarm on Crash because it was one that, like, I saw when I was young. It sort of affected me because I was disturbed by it, as you might expect. And I don't mean to be a hypocrite because, I mean, one of the things I obviously like about Cronenberg is that his movies are about, like, making people uncomfortable and doing the unexpected and subverting expectations and things like that. Same thing like how, people who've watched the show will often hear me lambast people who, or society in general, when we talk about how we view movies and like how okay in general, most of us, of course there's exceptions, are okay with like a lot of violence and stuff, but once you throw some sex in there, everybody gets upset. So I don't want to
Right.
come across as a big hypocrite, because the whole point of this movie is like it's sort of a juxtaposition of sex and violence in kind of a weird way, and I do find it very off-putting, but at the same time I find it off-putting in that, like, I certainly can't enjoy it, but and I'm not like one of those people that's like, they're who's going to rail against the movie. I don't have any problem that the movie exists or anything like that. And it seemed like a fitting movie for Cronenberg to do. So of course he wrote it like he wrote almost most of his movies. But of course it is based on the novel of the same name by G Ballard from 1973. And I was saying to Jay before, a big whiff that I'd made, of course, because when you look at his novels, a lot of his novels are kind of twisted and weird and have yeah, they have some sort of weird hook or angle to them. He did a movie, one in the '70s that I like a lot. That I can't remember now. It was so many years ago. I was in my teens, and I was talking to somebody about books, and they suggested High Rise to me, and I read it and really loved it. But I remember saying on some show, I don't even know if it was one that related or if we just on the topic of Cronenberg, and I was saying, isn't it weird that like G Ballard, we did do another show based on a movie based on one of his novels, but it was the novel Empire of the Sun, and I was like, isn't
Mhm.
that weird? He writes all these kind of twisted, fucked up, edgy kind of novels, and then he has like this World War II drama. It's like, well, apparently either I forgot or just didn't know that like that's more or less autobiographical in that Ballard himself was born in Shanghai in 1930, and so
Mhm.
spent the war in China and was in a not POW, but what is it, civilian or whatever, civilian prisoner camp through the war. So that's why he wrote that book, because obviously it's very close to, I'm sure, what his own experience were as a British citizen in
Man, how did
China
we
during
miss
World War
that?
II. And
How,
I don't know.
I don't know how we missed that. 'Cause I had
Yeah,
no idea either.
yeah. So maybe I knew at one point and forgot. I don't know, but yeah, I could remember remarking, like, isn't it weird? Like he writes all these books, but then he writes this kind of serious, sedate, like World War II novel. It's like, oh, it's because it's from his own damn life. But anyway, but another thing I sort of missed out on too was like I'd always wanted to read the book of Crash
Mhm.
and sort of see how it compared to the movie. And then I was trying to find it, it's not at my library. It's at a library like kind of far away that I think they could get it. Anyway, and one of the things I forgot though when I was at the library is twice now I've taken out the same book about Cronenberg's career called like The Artist as Monster, and I should have
Oh,
taken out it again because then I could have read the chapter on Crash, because yeah, every chapter is really long and is really,
yeah.
and it talks in great detail about all the movies that he'd done up to I think 2002 when the book came out. So I should have thought of that when I was at the library on Thursday, but I was just content looking for the books themselves. I didn't even think about looking for the Cronenberg book and taking it out at like a record third time. I should have; it would have helped. But we'll try. We'll get through what we can on this one. So as I said, one of the things that sort of affected me about this movie is I saw it quite young. I saw it when it was fairly new. I was only like 13, 14 when I saw this movie on TV because my family did have what was then TMN, or the movie network, the Canadian movie network that would show movies on TV. It also had a certain amount of Canadian content sprinkled into it, and this would have been part of it, in that this movie, that's specifically what it was made for, although it did have a theatrical release, at least a limited theatrical release in North America. So I probably saw it maybe late in 96, early 97, something like that. So, and then for many years afterwards, I saw maybe parts of it, but definitely not start to finish. And I was just sort of reluctant to revisit it because I remember how kind of like uncomfortable it made me, but I was like, no, it's a good time to revisit.
Do you know if it was the NC-17 cut that aired on that channel?
Like, the way I remember it makes it seem like it must have been, because of the way I remember certain details.
Right.
Because I just watched it on, what TMN actually has eventually morphed into over the years, which is Crave, and it's on Crave, and it didn't look like it was heavily edited or cut or anything. It still had graphic stuff in it, but I still felt like there were a few key shots missing or something. Either that or it just wasn't watching well enough, although I don't think so, because I even backed it up and watched a few times for some of those sex scenes to see if I could get some of the details that like if you read like the synopsis on Wikipedia, it mentions a few details that I remember, but then I don't remember actually seeing on this viewing. So I'm not sure. I'll watch it again just to be sure, maybe. Well, not the whole movie, but back to those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of lingering shots on some pretty graphic sex scenes that, I mean, nothing that crazy to us nowadays, but just because it's become so commonplace, but no penetration, but it's, some pretty graphic stuff. I saw, that
I don't know. I kind of feel like
without that, so
it's hard to think of movies of the last decade that, at least well-known movies, that had like sort of somewhat graphic sex scenes. Like what's like a well-known movie the last 10 years that has fairly graphic sex in it? Like
Nymphomaniac.
Right. That's like 2011. So yeah,
Oh,
I mean that still counts.
That's a sidebar, but that's a reason why you don't see a lot of even nudity in movies anymore, because of, from what I understand, the Me Too movement. It's these sets and directors, they don't even want to be accused of anything, so they don't even attempt any sort of scenes involving nudity anymore.
Right. It is tough because in the last few years, I've read a lot of articles about like famous nude scenes from movies where we thought everything was fine, and then you find out like the actress is saying, "Oh no, actually I was really uncomfortable and I regret it." There was a thing. What was it? It was Rosie Perez says she was really upset doing the nude scene in Do the Right Thing, that she actually cried on set and they kind of like talked her into it. Of course, Sharon Stone won't shut up about that scene from Basic Instinct, the famous legs crossing scene, where she was saying she's like tricked into it, which makes no sense to me. I don't understand she'd be tricked into it, but I don't know. So there's a few of those.
She wouldn't have had a career if it wasn't for that scene.
Yeah, she's not a very good actress. I never thought she was a good actress.
That's what that movie was known for, and to young boys.
but that's sort of what it is. Like the late 80s and at least the first half of the 90s had a lot of like sexy thrillers that were mainstream. Yeah. Like I feel like sexy thrillers don't really exist anymore. Not that I mind, because sexy thrillers, most of them are less sexy and kind of more dumb, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, it's like every Michael Douglas movie in the 80s and 90s.
I know, and I've complained about this before. I was like, Michael Douglas wasn't like a terrible looking guy or anything, but I couldn't buy in that like he was always had like the hot women going for him, and he could wrap them around his finger and stuff. Mm-hmm. He's in like, obviously most famously that, but he's also in Disclosure, which is a Michael Crichton novel.
Fatal Attraction?
He's in Fatal Attraction. And he's in not as much, but or no. Who is it in? Is that him in? No, that's Pacino. Is Pacino in? Who's in Sea of Love?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I think that might be Pacino. I always used to say that like Sea of Love was a great alternative to Basic Instinct, because I was like, they tell kind of a similar story, but I just think even though Basic Instinct is more famous and stuff, I always felt like Sea of Love was the superior movie. But Disclosure is easily the worst book I've ever read by Michael Crichton.
Really? I didn't even realize Crichton wrote that.
I mean, it's kind of funny because we're talking about Me Too. Like, the book is sort of almost entirely about that kind of thing because it's about like affairs in an office setting and how it's like affecting everybody and fucking everything up and
Right.
like the balance of power between the characters and stuff. It's a terrible, terrible book that I can't stand. It's just him trying to do something different. He's like, I've done enough sci-fi
Yeah.
bullshit,
Yeah.
let me do my sexy office thriller. And it always threw me off because there's a character in the book called Don Cherry, which of course makes me think of, famous Canadian hockey pundit Don Cherry. So I couldn't read the book without picturing him, which of course would be wildly not at all what the character was. But yeah, it's like some software company or something in the 90s. And it's a little sexual game of cat and mouse between this guy and this woman trying to get the upper hand on each other and all this shit. It's boring as hell. I read it start to finish, though. I think the copy is still. I don't remember Sleeping with the Enemy. I know. No, I don't think that was Douglas. That was some guy with a mustache.
Oh yeah, and
that was Julia Roberts.
He did so many. That show Big Mouth. I don't know. It's a cartoon on Netflix.
I know what it is. I haven't seen it, but yeah.
They did a live action play of Disclosure. It was pretty funny.
I love that. Yeah, but yeah, I feel like sort of the erotic type thriller has kind of died out. But again, these things run in cycles because we've talked before about like the 90s are sort of the pinnacle of stuff like that because there was, nowadays like time slots and stuff mean nothing. But
right.
we both grew up where the programming on TV would change after a certain time and. Right. And that's how I got to see lots of nudity on TV before, like, the internet was a big thing. Like, I would watch things on Showcase and Bravo.
Right.
Red Shoes Diaries and various softcore movies that would come on. And I think that was just sort of riding that wave with a lot of these other movies, right?
Right.
Because it's true. Like, you think about, like, more of a golden age Hollywood. You saw all these actresses, and they were very pretty, but you weren't going to see them nude.
Right.
But now, like, things have changed where, yeah, certain ones aren't going to do nude scenes, but certain ones might, like a Sharon Stone or something like that, Hell, I remember it was such a big deal that Halle Berry's topless for 5 seconds in Swordfish, which is a completely otherwise forgettable movie. But you can see Halle Berry's breasts in 2001, which is a great year for Halle Berry, if you watch that movie. So I guess there's that.
Yeah.
But that's still 2001 or 2002 or something like that. So that's close to the 90s, so it hasn't completely died out yet. But yeah, these things just run in cycles, I think.
It was almost like an art thing to it, like to be a successful actress. Like it wasn't going to ruin your career anymore, but it was almost like, Johansson did, Under the Skin. A lot of these, mainstream actresses now have done nude scenes, but not recently,
Yeah. And you can endlessly debate the difference between something that's artistic and serves a story and something that's exploitative. And then there's a different sort of exploitative too, because there's just sort of a fun exploitative that doesn't mean the actress herself is being exploited or treated poorly, but the movie, we realize this is just gratuitous. And then there's the more bad, literal exploitative. Because I mean, there's we've even talked about the same thing with like slashers, right? Like slashers have gotten more violent, but the sex and nudity is way down from what it used to be. Like there was always at least some breasts in like an 80s slasher, even if it was brief, they were there.
Virtually non-existent now.
And virtually non-existent now.
But this film, like, it's so much about the sex that's almost a character in the movie. Like that's what the movie's about. So
yeah,
it kind of has to show it. Yeah.
So I mean, again, it's fitting that Cronenberg didn't write the novel, but you can see why he's the guy to adapt it because. Sex and sort of body horror are his things. All his movies have strong sexual content or at least subtext. And this movie's body horror is more realistic. It's just sort of like wounds and injuries and such, as opposed to his more sci-fi stuff. But yeah, it's the perfect mix for somebody like him to tackle because that's his bread and butter anyway. As I know, I kind of backslid over the summer and drank some pop, and now I still.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I'm saying after Christmas I'll shake it off again. because I had gone 2 years completely cold turkey.
Wow.
I shouldn't backslide.
I believe it's been 2 years. But yeah, I think Cronenberg really has a knack for adapting novels. You know, he did Naked Lunch, of course, which I don't know what
Which is
Burroughs
almost
thought of
impossible. Which would be an almost impossible novel to adapt, right? You want to talk about novels that are unadaptable? That would be right up there. And he makes it even weirder because
Burroughs is probably dead by that point, wasn't he? When that was actually released.
That's a good question. When did he die? I think he died before that. I think he died like at the beginning of the 80s or something like that.
He was in the movie we did.
Oh no, he was still alive. He died at the end of the 90s. He died in 97. He lived a lot longer than I expected. He was 83. Okay.
Because he was in Drugstore Cowboy, right? So
I believe so.
But
I always get there's Burroughs mixed up because there's William S. Burroughs and then there's the other Burroughs. They were active around the same time in the 50s, so I get them mixed up. But I mean, William S. Burroughs, he's like the part of that beat poet generation type thing, you know, with like people like Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. You know, he was one of those guys. Actually, not to get off topic, but he wrote a really interesting sort of fantasy type novel that I've always wanted to read that I haven't gotten around to yet. Let's see if I can find the title there. And he wrote it when he was a bit older too. Yeah, it was actually it's kind of the last stuff he was writing. He wrote a trilogy of kind of like sci-fi-ish fantasy novels in the 80s: Cities of the Red Night, The Place of Dead Roads, and The Western Lands, which came out between 81 and 87. And I've always been interested in reading them. It's just another thing I haven't gotten around to. But yeah, so he would have been really old already when he wrote those. He would have been like in his 70s when he was writing those. So that's interesting. Whereas I think Naked Lunch was his first or second novel published in 1959. But yeah, as we were saying, getting back to this, yeah, Cronenberg adapting what seems like unadaptable. And taking an already strange, weird stream of consciousness book and making it even kind of weirder and more meta, because he actually incorporates, because he doesn't just incorporate the story. I mean, obviously he can't take everything, but he takes the main story, what's going on in Naked Lunch, but then he also blends it with the actual writing of the book, like what Burroughs was going through while he was writing, and he mixes that in too, complete with the whole infamous thing where Burroughs, you know, shot his wife doing the weird party game, which caused him to be exiled to like Mexico for several decades so that he wouldn't go to jail. When he shot, or I guess it wasn't his wife, it was Joan Fulmer Adams. I don't know if they were married, but they were together. But they were playing some sort of weird, what was like a William Tell type game.
Yeah.
And he shot her.
Never a good idea, I don't think.
It's funny. Like everybody talks about how, what's his name? Polanski fled after getting charges against him in the 70s for the incident with the girl, and how he fled to Europe instead of facing the music. And I mean, I get it, but Burroughs did the same thing, and he fucking killed somebody. And yet he doesn't seem to get that much hate for it.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
I mean, it wasn't murder, but he still killed somebody. And yet, instead of facing the music for it, he fucked off to Mexico and then South America. No, wait, they were in Mexico when it happened, I guess. I'm getting confused. But I do know he fled anyway.
But Ballard, I think, really thought this was a great adaptation.
Yeah. There's a quote where he says he thinks it's better because it goes further than the novel or something. Although I don't know what the main differences are. It seems to follow it fairly closely as far as the main story beats go anyway. And what's funny is, like, before taking a look at the novel again, well, not the novel physically, but just like reading about it, like, I always thought that the fact that that James Spader's character called Ballard was just, you know, a nod to Ballard who wrote it. But it turns out, like, in the book, that is the character's name, which is really weird.
That's meta as hell, yeah. Like, Cronenberg actually said, he's like, what he should have done is name the character David Cronenberg, you know, in the movie. So it would have taken it that one step further, you know.
Yeah, and just before I dig myself too much of a hole by making mistakes there, he spent 13 days in jail, but then his brother came and bribed the lawyers and officials to let him out. So I mean, that's not exactly going on the run, but it's not justice being served.
Because it was in Mexico.
Yeah, it was Mexico in the 50s. You know, you go down, you pay off some people, and
I don't know that it's that much different now.
probably not. Who wants to be a lawmaker in Mexico when the cartels are like mowing you down on the steps? You know, you try to stand up for what's right in Mexico, you get your head blown off, and maybe they go after your family too. Very sad state of affairs. But anyway, so it is kind of a different thing. But I'm just saying, despite the fact that Burroughs had more or less gotten away with killing someone, accident or not, it doesn't seem like he had much of a stigma around him. But anyway, maybe it's just because it was a bit earlier. I don't know. I mean, it's 2021 and people still don't shut up about Polanski. Like
always brought up. Always.
It's like it was like 50 years ago, almost. I'm not saying that it didn't matter, but I just mean, Jesus, what do you want to happen at this point? It's not like the Bill Cosby thing where it was like decades of decades of getting away with doing stuff. It was one incident. But anyway, I don't want to. I'm already on a slippery slope here.
We've talked about that on here enough, so
yeah,
in the past.
Because I mean, people nowadays talk about people being canceled and blah blah blah, and I guess it exists to a certain extent for some people, not so much for others. Because sometimes people think people getting canceled, but it really doesn't happen. It's just more like, oh, there's a backlash on Twitter. Well, okay,
right.
that doesn't necessarily ruin your career or anything, but
sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, it sticks to some people better than others, and I mean, some of it, of course, comes down to like what the person does if they try to, I don't know, at least admit their guilt or make amends, and and there's levels of that too, right? Because we have people that have actually committed crimes, and then we have people that haven't committed crimes, but they've been unprofessional and they've done things that have negatively affected people. It's not a crime, but it's not a good thing. It's like, well, what is the appropriate punishment for that, or how do you I get it. It's all very complicated because that's the thing. You can't paint everything with the same brush.
Exactly.
But anyway, getting back to this. Sorry, I was thinking about William S. Burroughs. Naked Lunch. We'll probably wind up doing Naked Lunch at some point, just so I can talk about it, because it's such a bizarre movie. But back to Crash.
Well, so basically you've got a couple that they're married and they're trying to spice up their relationship a little bit, and they're both into car crashes, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, they kind of discover it though, right? Because at first it's just like they're in like an open marriage, and they don't have much passion for each other, so they go and have sex with other people separately, and then they tell each other about it. Like it opens with like she had sex with some guy in an airplane hangar, and he had sex with his very attractive camera assistant or something. And then they talked about each other about it, and it's like, no, it didn't really do anything for me. And she's like, no, me neither. And they're like, oh dear. And then they just by accident wind up in a car crash, which is actually fatal, where the driver of the other car is killed. The husband of Holly Hunter's character, is it Helen? And that's when you get sort of a glimpse of it, is because even though they're just in a car crash and someone has fucking died, one of their victims is actually visibly turned on. Like she actually like exposes her breasts to them. And then when he meets her at the hospital and meets the doctor, then it all starts to go, because you find out like it all sort of originated with Elias Koteas' character Vaughn, who had brought Helen into this world of, I don't know, like mixing car crashes with sex in a way, and people that are sexually excited by car crashes. It's very bizarre, as you can imagine. It's really weird stuff.
Yeah.
And they just sort of get pulled into that world.
They meet Vaughn at the hospital as well, right?
Right, and Vaughn's all like really interested in his injuries and everything. But then, like when he first meets Helen again, obviously she seems like she's mad at him. I mean, he's the reason her husband's dead. But then she seems to soften on this, and then tells them about a little more about Vaughn and the stuff they're into, and takes them to one of his weird public performances where he talked about the car crash that killed James Dean, and they tried to do a reenactment.
Yeah. So it seems like a pretty unhealthy thing to be into, pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly like flirting with death, death and
Right.
sex and death and sex.
Right, and we all get that. That's older than the movie, of course.
Sure.
And the idea of course, and sadomasochism and stuff, some pain with sex and all that stuff. Never really did it for me, but I don't judge people, I guess. It's funny because I always say, whatever people do, if they're consensual and nobody gets hurt, that's fine. But this is people that are consensual, but people do get hurt. So I would say I don't condone of this, although I don't think it's real. Well, I don't think there's ever been a case of it happening in real life. Other that, or they kept it quiet pretty well.
I mean, it's almost like, actual badges, like, because they get hurt and they heal. They don't die, they heal, and then they get off on the scars too. So it's kind of interesting in that regard.
I can understand people liking scars. Lots of people think scars add character and they mean that and whatever like that. But these people are like interested in injuries and wounds. Like one thing that's not shown as much in the movie that's in the book is the character that has like the leg braces.
Rosanna Arquette's character.
Rosanna Arquette's character. Like it's understood, I guess, in the book that she's sort of exalted within the group and seen as the most desirable because of her condition. Like it's not exactly made completely clear in the movie, although obviously he does go after her. I mean, everybody has sex with everybody in this movie.
That's what James Spader said when he signed on to it. He was like, "Well, I get to have sex with all the women and the men."
Yeah. This stuff must appeal to James Spader. I mean, he's in Secretary too.
Yeah, he's great though. He really is great in this. The whole cast is great. I mean, I think it's an amazing. Let's talk about the cast for a little bit.
I mean, you get everybody to buy in.
James Holly Spader, Hunter,
Elias Koteas,
Deborah Kara Unger. I think just Deborah Unger in this film.
Yeah, that's his wife. I don't really know her, but she's the wife.
I think she was relatively unknown at the time too when she was cast. She does a great job.
She's Catherine.
And Rosanna Arquette is Gabrielle.
Yeah.
And I think when I originally watched this movie, I didn't realize that those were two different characters. Because they were just blonde women. And I guess I know that sounds stupid, but I didn't realize that they were two different. Because I've only seen this once before I watched it last night.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I probably only saw it once all the way through. Because, again, I would see pieces of it on TV for a few years and things like that. And then it just stopped being on TV, as a lot of things do.
Just to check it off the Cronenberg list, I saw it. But it's a hard movie for me to find. I don't know. Maybe it's easier for you to find because it's a Canadian film. But
I assume that's why it's on Crave, because it's a Canadian film. Although, that being said, like right now, I think that's the only Cronenberg that's on there. So I don't know how this. I don't know how this works. But Elias Koteas is like the most twisted character in the movie, I'd say. I mean, he's the catalyst. He's the one that it all comes from.
Right. But yeah, I wanted to own this, and I realized that it was in print again. So I don't normally buy these super expensive Criterions. I wish I could, but they do a great job. But $30, $40. However much they are is kind of pricey for me, but I think I own Videodrome and like maybe one other, like maybe Kronos. That's like the only Blu-rays I have Criterions.
Videodrome is, I mean, it's been a while probably since I had it, so it probably would have been the DVD, not the Blu-ray. But I can remember like so many times like agonizing over buying the Criterion DVD of that, like 10 years ago or so. I haven't really seen it since. It's funny. I've got the Criterion on order, but I don't think it's ever going to come in, so I'll probably have to cancel it because I don't know what's going on there. But the ones I own are, I mean, one I didn't even buy. Orc bought it for me on some Criterion sale. I thought he was joking, but one of my favorite movies talked about before, the Life Aquatic. So I have that because Orc bought it for me and sent it to me, and I have Brazil.
Oh,
So I'm very
Which
proud of.
we're going to cover both of those on here at some point.
Yeah, those are two of my absolute favorite movies. I mean, like top 20. Like that's how high up they are for me. I adore those movies. And I also own a couple not so like they're not like big editions because they're more just foreign movies, like so they don't have the usual treatment. I own a few DVDs, like that's how I have Fighting Elegy. Remember I showed that off. We're talking about some of that Japanese director. It's just some random movie from the 60s. So I've got technically the Criterion edition, but there's nothing special about it. It's just a DVD with not much on it. And I might have one or two others like that, but I can't think. But those are the two Blu-rays I own for that. But yeah, there's lots of great stuff. And of course, yeah, and there's certain directors, like the two I just mentioned, certain directors, all their stuff gets the Criterion treatment. Terry Gilliam, who did Brazil. I'm pretty sure all his movies get the Criterion treatment.
Yeah.
Wes Anderson, who did the other, all his movies. And same thing with Cronenberg. Like all Cronenberg movies have it.
Well, we've covered films from all those guys on this channel, so
yeah, definitely among my favorite directors. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this. Like you say, Cronenberg is most of the time probably your very favorite director.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny because people who know me know that, like, unlike a lot of people, like I've realized in conversation, like either with just random people or if, like on a dating site or something like that, if I try to ask somebody, like if they tell me they like somebody, like they tell me they like a band, and I say, "What's your favorite song?" they might not have an answer. Whereas I know the band, right. Even bands I'm not fans of, I know like my favorite song by them. And the other thing, like the more of a fan I am of something, the more I can usually break it down. Like hell, if it's like the Beatles or something, I'll do a top 10 of my favorite songs. You know, I realize most people aren't wired that way, so I'm always ranking things and putting favorites. Directors is actually something I really struggle with. I have a real problem deciding who I like more, and it's hard for me to compare directors because if you just go by body of work, like okay, what director has made the most movies that I like? It's Hayao Miyazaki, but Hayao Miyazaki is a director of animated films, and you know that's much different than directing live action films. And then even when you're comparing directors who direct live action films, sometimes their careers are just so different in the the type of movies that they've done. It's very hard to compare them. It just comes down to what your favorite is. So I know a lot of my favorite directors, but unlike, and I think this is most people think, well, that's normal, but it's not normal for me. Like I can name like 10 of my favorite directors, but I can't really put them in order. I know Cronenberg's up there, and the other two are up there. As much maybe, I guess, because he's been mainstream and successful, people don't like him. I do like James Cameron a lot, even if he hasn't really, even though he takes off like a decade between movies now. He's too busy making, supposedly making like sequels to Avatar that nobody even really wants. But
exactly.
But I still really like him. I'm one of the only people that remembers that, like 2 years ago, they finally made the Alita Battle Angel movie, and it was directed by Robert Rodriguez. And it was pretty good. It's weird and wacky, but it's good. But originally, way back, ages and ages ago, that was James Cameron was supposed to direct it. And I wish that he had. And that's nothing against Robert Rodriguez, because he did a good job, and I like a lot of his movies too. But I still feel like that was, a missed opportunity, something that I was looking forward to for years, and then he just dropped out and became a producer because he was too busy doing whatever the fuck he's doing.
Yeah, because since Titanic, like, what has he done? I mean, like actual feature films. I mean, I know he did Avatar, but is that it? Because we're talking 20 years.
I know. Well, this is a guy that only goes big. He doesn't have any small like in between movies.
I don't get that, but I guess he doesn't need to work.
It's true though. Like the only thing he's done since Titanic is focus stuff on like deep sea diving stuff and all these supposed avatars. I mean, so that's one of the reasons why it's easy for me to call him one of my favorite directors though, because like he did like a shitty first movie, Piranha 2: The Spawning, and then it's just all like amazing movies. And well, I don't really care about True Lies, but it's okay. And Titanic was certainly overrated in its day, and this love story is a little saccharine and annoying, but it's still, a very well-made movie, and certainly an entertaining watch, and groundbreaking at the time for, its effects, and just how seriously they did take it. They really did their research and everything to make everything look the way it looked. It really is like, sometimes we take that for granted with movies. It's like, that movie was made in 1997, so it was... And the Titanic happened in 1912, so that's like what, like 70, 80, I don't know, 75 years, something like that. Anyway, a long time ago. It's crazy now. It's 2021, so the Titanic was well over 100 years ago, which blows my mind. But it's just me to really show the world, at least a small piece of the world, what it was like way back when, by looking back at old photographs and reading journals and diaries and newspapers. That's what they did. And recreating the Titanic as close as possible, like not an actual boat, but on movie sets and stuff. I mean, it's incredible. It looks great. Just the clothes everybody wears, the colors of the chair, like all that stuff, like that's dead on. So I just have to respect it from that standpoint. But so James Cameron's sort of interesting, and he's a favorite director of mine, and yet really he's done very little compared to most people.
Yeah, that is
true.
true.
I mean, he's done 8 feature films. One of which is Piranha 2: The Spawning. And I don't even know. Like, Avatar came out in 2009, and now they're saying Avatar 2 could come out next year, but I doubt it will. I mean, that doesn't, unless they've really been keeping things under wraps, I don't see how that's possible. Then again, maybe the whole pandemic thing actually helped that situation. I mean, so much of that movie is just green screen stuff anyway. It's not like they have to go out, it's not like so many movies that got shut down because they have to shoot on location.
Right.
Avatar's not shooting on location. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they could probably do a lot of the CGI and stuff, socially distance.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, so it's hard. So I do rank him amongst my favorite directors, and yet he's got a small body of work compared to most of it. And I mean, there's still some underwhelming stuff moved in there. I guess it just shows like just how strongly I feel about his movies, like The Terminator and Aliens. Obviously, Aliens is my favorite. But I mean, I actually really do like Avatar. I get why it's easy to make fun of, and I'm not saying it's like the great thing of our time, but it's also a movie that people seem to lose track of right before it came out. It was like it took everybody by surprise. I was like, are you kidding? That movie was in development for years and years. I used to follow it on IMDb and stuff like that. And yet I can remember like December 2009 was coming out, like talking to people. I was like, I can't wait for Avatar. They're like, what's that? And yet, then Avatar smashes all these records and everyone's like, oh, I'm so sick of Avatar. It's funny.
I just hope he can finish the movies before he dies, man. Like, what's the director? Lethal Weapon 5 was in production, and
oh yeah, him. Yeah. James Cameron has an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to his unrealized projects. One of my favorites probably is Spider-Man. He was supposed to do tentatively they were going to do a Spider-Man movie around 94, 95. It would have been fucking awful. You can read some of the script, it's leaked online. In it, much like the 2002 Spider-Man, he fights the original Green Goblin in it. But one of them, like when he's like fighting him, he like smacks him and calls him a motherfucker. I'm like, Spider-Man? Also, much like the original movie, because one of the main problems I have with we're not going to get into the comic book stuff, but one of the things I really didn't like about the Tobey Maguire movies was like he didn't have web shooters. His webs were just organic and they came out. Like the way Cameron wrote the scene where his powers are first manifesting, he deliberately wrote it so like the webs coming out was like very sexual seeming. Like, and I don't know why you would do that, so. But I mean, he was going to do a Planet of the Apes movie, a Fantastic Voyage movie, Dungeons and Dragons. He was originally going to do the Solaris remake that fucking the actor took over. Anyway, you know what I mean. There was going to be a True Lies 2, Alien 5.
Wait, George Clooney?
Yeah, George Clooney. George Clooney, I'm pretty sure, directed it.
Did he?
He didn't just star in it. I think he directed it.
That movie is awful.
Yeah, that's one. I didn't see it in theater, but my friend Shane saw it in theater. He said like everybody walked out.
Awful.
Or did Steven Soderbergh direct it? I thought that Clooney took over and directed it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Soderbergh directed it. Okay. I always knew it starred Clooney. For some reason, I thought Clooney, I thought the whole thing was Cameron dropped out, and then I didn't know it was Soderbergh, but I thought whoever was next who was Soderbergh, I thought they dropped out too, and Clooney wound up just directing himself. So, but I guess I'm wrong. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, the original movie is so good. It's one of the worst remakes you'll ever see, and just so boring. But anyway, it's interesting. We don't have time to go on about James Cameron any further, but yeah, it's interesting that this whole page of projects he was originally attached to, so many that sound so cool and just never happened. And like now his life is just devoted to Avatar.
Yeah.
That's too bad you couldn't get those out like 7 or 8 years ago when people might have still given a shit. Like nobody cares now.
I mean,
I
he's been
like
talking
Avatar.
about it forever. Yeah, I don't. What's taking so long?
I mean, I get that they're huge, ambitious, expensive movies, but that's what he's done his whole career.
Yeah.
He's 67, so I mean, he's not old, but I mean, you never know.
Okay, he's
And
a
I
little
don't.
younger than I thought.
And at the same time, like how do you want to work right up till you die? Not everybody wants to. I mean, I can picture James Cameron as sort of one of those sort of workaholic types, but I mean, he got all into the deep sea stuff, which is fine. I mean, if he wants to do that, it's fine. And I guess that was one of the main things that sort of kept his focus off filmmaking.
He's been into that stuff for his whole career, because I know, like in the 80s, I went to a museum and there was a, talking about a dive. I don't think it was the Titanic, but it was, they were exploring the wreckage of something. And I just remember the robot's name was Jason, or the sub, it was no man in there. It was just like a robot. I just remember his, as my name. So that's the only reason I remembered the name of the thing. But yeah. Well, I guess that explains, the Abyss and stuff like that.
Yeah. I always loved The Abyss. I don't love it the way I used to. It was one of my favorite movies when I was younger. Now I still really like it, but it's not as high as it used to be. But
my taste changed, man, as I've gotten older. Like
that's
stuff I used to love, I just don't anymore.
I mean, that's happened to me with some things, but not that many. I mean, I'm one of those people where my taste hasn't changed that much when it comes, but that is one of them where, that was a movie I just used to love. I would have ranked it among my favorites. Another movie like that, no, I would have been older, but was one of my favorite movies, and I think it's Spielberg, isn't it? Was Catch Me If You Can. I still really like Catch Me If You Can, but there was a time where, again, that was like amongst my very top movies. Like now it's more of an afterthought, even though I still think it's a very good movie. So yeah, taste change. But anyway, James Cameron is a far cry from Cronenberg, even though they are both Canadian.
Yeah. Yeah, he actually was mentioning the one of the shots where they're driving around having sex in the car. It was I think invented on one of Cameron's sets. I forget what he called it, but it was a guy on a motorcycle with a sidecar, and the cameraman was in the sidecar, like next to the car. It works really well.
Yeah. See, that's another thing that's unfortunate about. One, I hadn't seen the movie in so long, and two, I've always been sort of disturbed by at least my memories of the movie, even though I did try. It's harder for me to watch this movie with a critical eye, so it's hard for me to talk about like stylistic things like cameras and stuff. Like I can't remember, even though I just fucking watched it. I guess because I'm just not watching it the way I watch most movies. Because like I couldn't tell you like too much about the camera techniques that were used and things like that. Even though whenever we do these movies, I try to pay attention to that. This time it just went out the window for me. So, I mean, there could have been a scene in black and white in this movie and I wouldn't have remembered. I know there wasn't, but
it's such a, for being a relatively small budget film, I think it was what, 8 million, something like that.
Yeah, 8 or 9 million.
I mean, it's amazing what he was able to do with that. It's just so impressive to me. Just such a beautiful film.
I wonder what his biggest budget was. Because even like the more mainstream movies he's done in like the 21st century, they weren't big budget films like A History of Violence or A Dangerous Method. Those are a little more mainstream. But I doubt that they had big budgets.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it goes to show you don't need these bloated budgets to make a great movie, like you were talking about Black Widow and, how much it cost and where's the money, it's not on the screen. So
A Dangerous Method, its budget was $14 million.
And a lot of that was probably Keira Knightley got a good chunk of that, I'm sure.
Cosmopolis might be his most expensive movie, $20.5 million. And how much is that? Like I said, how much is he paying Robert Pattinson? But no, I don't think Robert Pattinson actually.
I don't think he would. Yeah, he seems
Yeah.
like a art for art's sake type guy. So he'd probably take a pay cut. But
yeah, so I
like Robert Pattinson a lot.
Yeah, he's cool. I'm interested to see his Batman.
I don't necessarily like that movie, but maybe I need to watch it again.
It's an interesting movie. I mean, a lot of it's just him in the back of a limo,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, why does it cost so much?
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's his highest budget movie, Cosmopolis.
Makes sense, inflation.
20 million. Oh no, Eastern Promises is by far its highest budget, 50 million.
Wow.
Which nowadays would be considered a mid-budget movie. We talked about this before, how like mid-budget movies have kind of disappeared. Like movies with a budget between like $40 and $80 million, there's very few of those. Now it's either like some like small indie hit that gets big, or just some massive project that's well over 100 million. I mean, nowadays the biggest movies are over 200 million.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like a dick measuring type thing. Like, it has to, their last movie the budget was this, so this one has to be this. I just don't. Mm-hmm. I don't think throwing money at a movie is gonna make it better.
Exactly, and we talked many times about how so many low budget movies, because of the constraints, pressed upon them, they were able to come up with creative solutions that really work to the movie's benefit. You see that all the time in a lot of these low budget movies. But the mid-budget movie was not something I would have thought of on my own. I remember about a year ago or so, I was reading an article about the success of Knives Out, and it made that point that Knives Out was that kind of movie, and that those didn't exist anymore. It was sort of like a mid-budget movie. It was like $70-80 million, something like that. And it's like those movies used to be kind of the main thing, but now it's either like really low or really high. There's very few mid-budget movies, and when they do come out, they don't really necessarily move the needle the way, say, Knives Out did. Yeah. So that's why they were saying that Knives Out was kind of like an anomaly in its time.
That was pre-COVID, right?
Just barely, but yeah.
Because I can't believe it's been that long ago since it came out, but I know it did pretty well.
Yeah, no, it was a big deal. I don't think there was ever going to be a sequel. Now there's going to be a sequel, I think, entirely because of just the massive response it got, which is cool because I like that movie. I'm a big fan of Murder Mysteries and Agatha Christie. So it's nice to see like a movie that's kind of a tribute to that can actually still do well today. Who'd have thunk that the contemporary audience would be into that?
Right. The whodunit, and what's the name of that director? Ryan
Johnson.
Ryan Johnson. I like him a lot. I like his Star Wars, and I think he gets a lot of shit for it.
Yeah, me too. He's sort of one of the. I mean, he's beyond up and comer now, but he's one of the sort of like current generation guys that I like a lot.
Well, either you blame J.J. Abrams or you blame him for the the sequels being not good or whatever. But
I mean, if they hadn't like been at odds with each other, because it seemed like the whole point was like for each of them to undo or contradict what the other had done or make a point of changing something. Like fuck, you're gonna make a trilogy. You need some cohesiveness there. You can make a trilogy with different directors, but you have to, anyway. Yeah. But yeah, I can't muster up the hate for those movies that a lot of people have. And I really like The Last Jedi. I think The Last Jedi is a damn good movie, but most people are not going to agree with that.
Was that the last one they made? I get the titles mixed up.
That's the middle one.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite out of the three, actually.
Yeah, it's my favorite of the three.
Is that damn J.J. Abrams?
Yeah. I only think the third one is bad, which is too bad because it's the end, so it's kind of unsatisfying. The first one isn't bad; it's just too much of a retread. It feels like It feels like A New Hope Redux kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I like the other one because they're like, okay, put all that away, something completely new, abandoned, and people didn't like that either. So.
Well, they had zero faith in the Star Wars name being enough to draw the audience. Like, you got to have Leia, Luke, and Han in there. Chewie, you got to keep throwing it back, I don't know. I just wish they'd gone a completely different direction with it. And they are with some of this stuff, but I mean, still, it's all, now we've got, the Mandalorian. You remember the Mandalorian in the movie? You ready to see more of him?
I mean, I like The Mandalorian. It seems silly that they're making a Boba Fett show. I'm like, why do you need a Boba Fett show? You just did The Mandalorian, which is a really good show. And what's great about it is like it's not connected to that stuff. It's only, it's connected in a tertiary way. But I just mean the character himself. He's not, The Mandalorian's not in any of those movies. He's a completely new character, which is nice.
I just don't.
But yeah, why do you need a Book of Boba Fett show? You just did a show about a guy in Mandalorian armor that works as a bounty hunter. Now you're gonna Boba's the original. He's the most famous. Sure, okay, but
name recognition. I mean, there'll be a Lando. There'll be a Lando show. Isn't there going to be a prequel with Obi-Wan? It's
the only reason Obi-Wan's my favorite character, so I'm willing on that one. Again, unnecessary. I agree, unnecessary. But if you're gonna pick one of them, I would go with Obi-Wan because I like him so much. He's my favorite Star Wars character.
Yeah, well, we could beat this to death. We both feel pretty strongly about it.
Right. So I know we were just getting into a large discussion of budgets and directors, but anyway, Cronenberg has such an interesting career, as we said, because he goes his own way. He's one of those guys, like a lot of the lower budget guys, that sort of has to for at least for a period, had to like fight to get his movies made and getting them to work out. And he was always interested in doing the more original type of thing. There's plenty of instances where I think by the mid to late 90s, he had some bigger projects offered to him and he turned them down because he wanted to, focus on the stuff that interested him, which you have to respect.
Oh yeah. What was it? His agent wanted him to do a movie. What was it?
Was it like The Jury or something? The Juror? It wasn't Runaway Jury, but it was something like that. It was.
And he turned it down to do this, which I think is, you need to fire your agent, man.
Yeah, and then he did.
He doesn't get you. He did fire him? Okay, good.
He did fire him after that, which is, because, your agent doesn't get you when you...
Let me tell you, man, I respect the shit out of somebody that does that move, Respect the hell out of it.
So, of course, as we said, this movie makes a lot of sense for him because of the themes that are in it, which we've already seen in previous movies and would see in movies afterwards. But it is interesting to see that it's based on a book written by somebody else. So somebody else had some of their own sort of ideas about this. Ballard said at the time, it was just sort of one of those, in a very kind of straightforward way, sort of mirror up to society type thing of statements. Not dicking around about it, but just being pretty obvious about it is kind of how he said it. Maybe kind of an indictment on human nature and things like that. What's cool is like the movie shows like how destructive their path is, but it's still not a movie necessarily about making judgments. It's just sort of like, well, here's what happens type thing. It's not necessarily about. I mean, you could watch it and say like it's some sort of downward spiral for the characters. But I don't know, how would you take the ending? Would you take the ending as a positive or a negative? Because you could say the positive is this has worked for them. This has helped to bring them closer. But at the same time, he still, the last line, of course, is great. He's maybe the next one, which is a callback to the very start. When they're both talking about their unsatisfying extramarital affairs, she says how she didn't come with that guy in the airport place and didn't work. And he said, oh, well, maybe the next one. So now they seem to have rekindled to a bit. But then he says, no, maybe the next one. And there's different ways of taking that. One is, they're still not satisfied, and this has all been for nothing. Or two, it could be they do like it, but now they've become to the level of Vaughn, where they're basically chasing death.
Because she takes her seatbelt off, right? There at the end?
Yeah, she does, yeah.
She wants to die. I mean, I think they both kind of have a death wish. Same way Vaughn did.
Right. And I like the idea that maybe it's almost like a contagious thing. Like before, they just sort of had normal malaise.
Right.
They're two sexual people, but they weren't enjoying sex with each other. And when they tried having sex with other people, well, it seemed okay in the moment. Afterwards, it still felt sort of empty and unfulfilling too. But then they meet Vaughn and these people, and they sort of get swept up in it. And I like the idea of this death wish thing sort of is almost like contagious. Like they just saw Vaughn die before this, right? And it didn't mean anything to them, except perhaps maybe it did excite them. They're like, oh, that is the next level. It's the only logical thing is the next level is to get killed in a car crash.
Cronenberg makes it like, they're both going to die at the end of the movie. I mean, not that necessarily right there, but, It's kind of like the ending of Dead Ringers. You know, they both have to die.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just such a slippery slope. It seems like, you start off, you're watching cars crash, then you're in car crash, and you're more and more violent stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a good sort of metaphor, or whatever you want to call it, for like just addiction in general, right?
Yeah.
For any
Exactly.
sort of addiction, because I mean, this is an extreme addiction, obviously, and a very odd one that we don't even know exists in the real world. But then it's just like how it works, sort of, with any addiction. It starts off somewhat tame, but you have to keep topping yourself, and it becomes
Right.
more intense. And that's the
Yeah.
same thing with like drugs or alcohol. It's always going to be more and more and more. And the same thing with, like, say, a sex addiction too. And that's when these things start to become very destructive in your life. So it's the same thing here, right? Like it's an escalation.
You start off, you have a menage a trois, and before you know it, you're getting pegged and all this other stuff. Just got to keep ramping it up. But yeah, you're exactly right. For addiction, that's a perfect metaphor, because you're always chasing that first high, right? That's what people say.
Yeah.
And you can never find it.
You can never, but you're always trying to up it in some way, make it more extreme or something like that. I mean, the movie has an interesting sort of stance on sexuality, in that, like, it has a sort of kind of what I would consider, I wouldn't say ahead of its time. It's only ahead of its time in so far as now we're at a point where society where we are actually more ready to talk about it. Doesn't mean it wasn't already there. And then it's more of like a sexuality is sort of a fluid thing, right?
Fluid,
Like
exactly.
Pansexual.
Pansexual.
Right. Because, it's not about, like, when James Spader winds up having sex with Elias Koteas, it's not so much like this thing where he's been turned gay, or it's like, I've discovered I'm bisexual.
Yeah.
That doesn't really enter into it. It's just part of the whole thing they're swept up in. It's like, well, it's only logical that we have sex with each other too, because we're all part of this thing.
They've almost like superseded gender at that point. Like, it's more of a experience than a, man-woman, man-man thing,
Right. Which, I mean, and I don't want to get pansexual people angry, because it has nothing to do with car crashes and violence, but that is sort of like a pansexual thing where a pansexual person isn't necessarily thinking about feminine or masculine qualities. It's just something about the individual,
right?
Whatever they might be, and that's what appeals to them sexually. But yeah, it's funny because you can think, because one thing you can say is, like, this movie's more progressive, because think about it. It came out like 10 years before, what's it called? Brokeback Mountain, where you've got like sort of two. Now, I know James Spader and Elias Koteas aren't exactly A-list, but they were well-known actors. These weren't nobodies either. And I realized that the movie does sort of cop out there, doesn't it? Because its scene is not nearly as graphic as the other scenes. They basically let you know what's going to happen, then they pull back. And I don't know if people told Cronenberg he had to, because people would be like upset if, like, you saw some more graphic scene with two men, or what.
It was his choice. He felt like showing them like passionately kissing was almost like more graphic than if they were, grinding or whatever you want to say.
Right. But, well, I just mean, you get to the point where, like, he positions himself behind him, so you know that they are going to have penetration sex, and then you don't actually see any of it. And I don't mean seeing the penetration. I just mean, in lots of simulated sex scenes, you see the movement. Right. Say, you don't actually see that. And I'm not saying I'm disappointed in that, but I'm just not sure if that was like because they were concerned. It's like, okay, it's one thing to have these graphic sex scenes, but we're already implying these two are about sex. Like, I don't know. It's two men. It's 1996. I don't know what people are going to think. I don't know.
I mean, it was very ballsy for him not to shy away from the homosexual aspect of it, because
because regardless of what we just talked about, where it's like, it's really not about homosexuality, right? Like, a lot of people who are going to watch it and not get that.
Of course. Yeah.
They'd be like, "Now what? They're gay now?" So that's why I wouldn't say comparing it to like to something like Brokeback, because the whole point of Brokeback is like, it's two gay men who fall in love and have a relationship, or try to have a relationship. Whereas this is a movie that has nothing to do with love. This isn't about love. This is just about sex and the fetishism, and tying it all up with things like violence and death.
Right. I guess passion.
Sure. It's interesting because passion is love in some cases, but then there's like a detached passion that's separate from love, that kind of thing.
I think it's really interesting that we were talking about this before we went live. The anal sex scene, which I didn't really realize that was anal sex before reading some stuff about it. I mean,
Yeah, same here.
Whatever semantics, but
right. Whenever sex is shown from behind in a movie, you could guess maybe it's anal sex, although you have no reason to think in most movies that it is. Like, but it says that like he's having anal sex with his wife. And what's interesting about that is like this is where we first start getting the the gay stuff, or because she's fantasizing about Vaughn and she's asking him if he does.
Yeah.
And he's having sex with her, and the whole time she's talking about like, what do you want to do to Vaughn? She's being very graphic, saying like, you know, do you want to penetrate his anus and stuff like that? And she's like, have you ever
his anus?
Yeah. Have you ever sucked a penis? She's saying, and he doesn't respond to any of it. He just keeps going. So at this point in the movie, you're not really sure what he's thinking, but it turns out like he's fine with that because he goes to himself have sex with Vaughn. Because it is an interesting scene from that perspective because he never answers anything she says, and you can think, is he just ignoring her and concentrating on banging her or what? But then you find out like obviously this isn't a turnoff for him, so it's interesting. Part of me wonders if that's like what puts the idea in his head. It's like, yeah, I guess I could fuck Vaughn. Yeah, you know, I don't know.
Well, Vaughn's like another thing to keep their relationship, you know, the passion in their relationship, the fire, whatever, in their sex life. That it starts there, you know, and then she has sex with Vaughn while he's driving.
Yeah.
And he kind of relives it later that night with the, you know, the bruising. He puts his hand on the bruise on her thigh. And then he eventually has sex with Vaughn. So it kind of all leads back to Vaughn.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because you don't see it in enough movies where like, because usually when people, even if it's like couples or whatever, they get fascinated by somebody and want to have sex with them, you know, it usually comes down to a very sort of raw physical attraction. It's like, this person is gorgeous, you know, they're beautiful. You know, with Vaughn, it's not because he's so physically attractive, you know, he looks fine, but it's just about who he is and what he represents, his, you know, the way he thinks and his scars and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole philosophy really appeals to them. This whole obsession with death through car crash, you know, I had some quotes that I lost now, but one of the things like G Ballard said was like that death by car crash was sort of like, I don't think he used the word romantic, but it was something like that. Like it's basically, at least, I mean, it's come now, but it's like a 20th century. It's like a uniquely 20th century ending for some people. Of course, now we're in the 21st century and it continues. But yeah, it's before that, you know, car crashes didn't exist in previous centuries. But it's like some new sort of way for us to die. And it's interesting when you think about like so many icons and famous people that died in car crashes.
Right. What was the one? Not the James Dean. What was the other one that they recreated? It was the other people from their group.
Right. Mansfield? So it was Jane Mansfield. What's hilarious about this is, once again, it's another case of my life just being weird and stuff lining up, because I was having a conversation with my mother like a week ago. I don't even remember what it was about. And she brought up Jane Mansfield. I knew the name, but I was like, who the hell is Jane Mansfield? My mom, she was like, oh, she was sort of like a big sex symbol back, you know, in the 50s and things like that. And I had to look her up. And that was like a week ago. And that was before I knew we were doing this or anything. And now like her death is actually kind of like a focal point of this. Cause yeah. But so they had that other friend that was involved in it. And like he, Colin Seagrave, he actually recreates it and gets himself killed. And it's pretty funny too, because he recreates it by putting himself in a wig and casting himself as Mansfield in it, and he dies. And it, you know, that really probably the funniest scene in the movie is that, and it's weird dark black humor that Cronenberg uses so much, because they come across the wreckage. The EMTs just completely ignore Vaughn while he goes around very ghoulishly snapping pictures of everything, including close-ups of his now deceased friend. And he's only upset. He's like, oh, you went ahead and did it without me. Like, I want to be part of it.
He's like jealous.
And then he sees like that he included the dog, which I guess was in the original thing. And he's like, oh, the dog, that's genius, or something like that. He brought some poor dog into it to make it authentic. Let's see here. In 1967, Mansfield was in Biloxi, Mississippi. She was in Mississippi for an engagement at the Gus Stevens Supper Club, blah, 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 some things. Anyway, she left after midnight in a 1966 Buick Electra 225, headed for New Orleans, blah, blah, blah. At about 2:25 a.m. on June 29th, on U.S. Highway 90, a mile west of Rigolette's Bridge, the Buick crashed at high speed into the rear of a tractor trailer that had slowed behind a truck spraying mosquito fogger. Is that a thing? Mosquito fogger?
Yeah.
Is that something you do now, way down in the south? Because
Yeah.
I don't know mosquito fogger. Okay. The semi-trailer was shrouded by insecticide fog. The 3 adults in the front seat died instantly. The children, asleep in the rear seat, survived with minor injuries. Thank God he didn't bring children into it. Although they live, but I mean, still, can you imagine? He wants to recreate this, so he just injures a bunch of children.
That would have been dark even for Cronenberg.
but anyway, what was interesting is he mentions that I guess it's an urban legend that Mansfield was decapitated. She was not. She suffered severe head trauma, which killed her. But for a long time, there was an urban legend that she was actually decapitated in the crash, but she wasn't.
So they were blinded by the mosquito fog?
That's what it says.
So, wow. Okay.
Well, it's not even actually. It just says that the truck was slowing down because the truck in front of it was spraying it. So I don't know if they were blinded, but they were like adjusting. So they slowed down suddenly and they crashed into it. Is what it says. So
yeah, it's just what it sounds like. They spray out like poison or mosquitoes. Yeah, we still have.
And Mansfield, I was actually wearing a blonde wig. So he wasn't just wearing the wig to look like a woman. He was wearing a wig because she was wearing a blonde wig. And I guess, and this is where the urgent legend started, because the wig was found, and I think pieces of like her scalp were actually in it. And then eventually people thought like her whole head came off, but it didn't. But yeah, James Mansfield. That's interesting. Actually, I remember one of the things that's really different about the book is that Vaughn has this plan. It's 1973, of course, in the book. Vaughn has this plan to die, but his plan is to crash into Elizabeth Taylor's limousine and kill her.
That's so weird.
Yeah. And it's not because he hates her. It's because, it's just because she's a big glamorous star, and he thinks that's the way to go out is dying, is like be part of one of those car crashes. It's pretty interesting.
Right. Yeah, we haven't mentioned the club. I guess you call it a club, where they all kind of sit around and jerk off and watch Volvo car crash.
Yeah, they're watching like
footage.
This Swedish thing talking about like how they use like crash test dummies and stuff, and yeah, they're all getting turned on watching it.
And the one guy that did the Jane Mansfield, it's like rubbing a bra.
Yeah, it's
really
pretty messed up.
He's really getting into it.
Because I mean, yeah, usually if you have like a group of like sexual fetishists in a room together, well, here's a perfect chance we can all fuck here. But that does not how it works with them. It's like we got to go out in cars and get some action first, and then we can have sex. We can't just have sex in here with the TV on. What the hell's that?
Let's go crash some cars and fuck.
Yeah. Which is pretty funny, because when we were, I don't know if we mentioned it much, but obviously there was some backlash to the movie and some controversy and some people that didn't want to show it. Like some like theater in like the UK or somebody said something like they didn't want to show it because they were worried about like copycats, like inspiring copycats. And I mean, I guess so, because it's true. People are no matter how dumb people are, they can always sink lower, and people will copy anything. I do agree, but I just mean still, you can say that about any movie, anytime, doing anything, though.
Yeah, you can't really go around thinking in those, like that. That's odd.
I mean, there's the odd kid that like 60 years ago jumped off a roof trying to fly like Superman, but
yeah,
that doesn't mean you erase Superman.
Kids are going to be jumping off buildings. I think we got bigger problems in society.
But here's the other thing that makes their sexual kink so interesting. Because when I always say, I don't care what people do, but you have to care in this case, because what they do actively endangers the public around them, right? When Vaughn died, I don't know if he killed other people, but he came close. He crashed. He flew off the higher lane down onto a lower one and landed on a bus. It's funny. It speaks to the movie's budget, and that it doesn't actually show that crash. It just shows the aftermath of the crash. And it's the same thing with the crash at the end, which wasn't even that big of a crash. But both times the cars just sort of veer off the road, and then it's off camera, and then you see it afterwards. I guess they didn't have the budget to actually show that. It's too bad. It's one of the few times where its budget would have helped. Imagine like had Vaughn had like gone out and it was way better. Like imagine Vaughn had done something that was like Final Destination 2. Where like doesn't like a chain reaction of dozens of cars smashing into each other.
He would have loved that.
I know he would have. But I mean, he had a bus, which I guess is pretty good. And what's funny is he wasn't trying to; he was just dicking around.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting to think, like, what Vaughn's intentions were at that moment. Probably he wasn't. The way I think it is that he wasn't trying to die, but he just had the attitude. It's like, well, if I get killed doing this, I do.
Right.
Like, I don't think he was specifically trying to die, and I don't think he was specifically trying to kill the other two, the couple that he's been chasing. I think he was just trying to get a rise out of them. But if he died or they died, well, that all would have been fine with him. So, but yeah, so they're an interesting group of fetishists that are actually a public danger because they get horned up and then they go out on the road and drive like maniacs.
That is true.
So that makes them kind of unique compared to most like sex groups or whatever like that. So, because whatever they're doing, they're probably just in some house, not bothering anybody. They might do some stuff that absolutely disgusts you, but you don't have to deal with it. It's behind closed doors.
What turns me on is suicide vests. Those are fun, man. Just wearing one of those and going into a crowd of people, man, gets me juiced up. But no, this film had a lot of backlash as far as the people with disabilities go. Actually,
right.
In the UK, the Daily Mail and the Evening Standard tried to get it banned. The British Film Board classification inquired with the Queen's Counsel and a psychiatrist, none of whom found any justification to ban it, and 11 disabled people who saw no offense with the portrayal of the physically challenged. It was actually praised in the disabled community because, with the scene with Gabrielle and James, they're having sex in the car. It's not exactly an easy process, and that's what they kind of say. It shows that it's not easy for them. They have to have kind of a sense of humor and
right.
Just kind of go with the flow. Things are going to be a little bit different, and they like that it portrayed them accurately like that. So kind of respect that a little bit.
Right, and I don't want to be misunderstood because it's not like because I don't want to be like, oh, disabled people disgust me, because no, of course not. And I absolutely would have sex with a disabled person or an amputee even and stuff like that. I'm just not a person who fetishizes them.
Right.
There's people that do that, right? And I would say for the other, there's a difference between you're having sex with a disabled person, no problems, but I don't want to have a sex with a person that is like actively dealing with wounds. There could be a supermodel, but if she's all like beat up and cut up and stuff, I'd be like, can we wait until you heal? I don't have sex with you while you have open wounds. So I don't think that's particularly judgmental or small-minded of me. So I'm making a line here. Like, no, I don't think I would have any issue having a relationship or even just having sex for fun, with somebody who's maybe an amputee or some sort of disabled. That doesn't bother me. No, but yeah,
unless that wound,
but actual wounds bother me.
Unless the wound looks like a vagina.
And see, in the version I watched, I don't remember seeing that. And yet that's one of the main things I remember about seeing it as a kid. So I'm wondering if the version I saw censored that. I'm going to watch it again tonight. I'm going to back up that scene. Because I always remember, it's like, yeah, doesn't he like fuck the back of her leg because it looks like a wound, kind of like a vagina? And the good thing is, like, I think I remember, it's not an open wound. It's just scars.
Right. Scars.
But it's still kind of gross looking.
Oh, yeah. He bust very quickly. He's into it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not something I can relate to.
No, me either. But it's got the classic, classic imagery for a Cronenberg movie. So
yeah, Cronenberg's movies are full of sex, but they're not full of sex that's meant to turn you on.
Right. Whether it's a leg vagina or a chest vagina that you put a Betamax into.
Yeah. Because I mean, even like little things like we talked about before in Videodrome, she's a bit of a sadomasochist, and she's like trying to get him to put like the needle through her ear, and she burns herself with a cigarette and stuff. Like, no, not for me.
No, me either. I'm not into that at all.
I think I'm pretty sexually open when it comes to a lot of things, but not that stuff. And I mean, one of the more tame ones is like a lot of people are into, not that anybody needs to know my sexual preferences, but I might as well tell you, is that one that's kind of more common and more vanilla is, when couples do stuff like blindfolds and handcuffs and that shit, like that's not even really seen as that big of a deal or kinky nowadays, right?
Not anymore, yeah.
Like I can't do that. Like I can't. It has nothing to do with, like, I could be with the love of my life, but I can't be restrained. I can't do that.
That's
A
like,
blindfold is fine. Like I think a blindfold is okay, but I can't be handcuffed or restrained. Like no, I'm not in the mood. I'm not in the mood for love in that moment. I'm like, no, I can't be cuffed. I can't be held. Like
that's like step number one and like how to spice up your sex life, you know, blindfolds, you know, handcuffs,
maybe
you know, they sell
maybe
those.
some little whips.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want
That's
to make a
just,
distinction there. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with say spanking or anything. That's fine. Although I do think it's a little overblown if you have like that weird thing to spank them with. I mean, that's going a little far. But again, not being judgmental, just saying not for me.
You're getting into the S&M aspect there, yeah. Which is fine.
Yeah, I don't have an objection to people doing it, but I could. It's not my. I wouldn't like it personally.
Me either.
But I know I like some things other people wouldn't like, but we're not going to discuss that. But
well, you know, it's kind of
let your imaginations run wild on that one, people. Just imagine all the depraved stuff that I have done and still want to do, because there's definitely some stuff that even in my long life I haven't done yet. Oh, here's hoping.
Yeah. Well, you know, all the stuff you just mentioned is kind of like, you know, considered vanilla, like in our generation, but maybe our parents' generation, grandparents' generation, it would have been pretty taboo, I would think.
Mm-hmm. I think so. But yeah, I think, as you said, that's sort of like the first one that comes to mind, to the point where, you know, nowadays it's not extreme or shocking anymore. It's like, oh yeah, some people do that.
That's the first article in Cosmo. That's what it says, you know.
I gotta give it to Cosmo for Cosmo, like every single month for how many years is coming out with like sex tips. I'm like, it's all been done, people.
It'll be like,
unless you want to start like suggesting some really illegal shit, you know.
Exactly. I mean, it'll be like some like big actress on the front and like have a blurb like by her forehead, like how to squirt on your man or something, you know.
I don't think that can be taught. Can that be taught? Can that be learned?
Yeah, I can.
It can? Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't done the research on that, I guess. Because, I mean, I know in some porn where you watch squirting, like, it's kind of fake. Like, the girl has the ability, but they use, like, water and stuff to make it look, since we're getting really into it in the porn.
It's the running discussion of is it pee or is it something else, you know? A little bit of both, I think.
Yeah. But it's interesting to think that somebody could perhaps learn how to do it.
Yeah, we just lost a viewer, so sorry about that.
Yeah. So this isn't even the first time we've talked about squirting on this show. I have to say that's like the one thing missing from this movie.
Yeah.
Although there is sort of a shot that's easy to miss, that like when his wife has sex with Vaughn in the backseat, there's a part where like her hand comes away and her hand's kind of like wet. You're like, oh yeah. You got to give them that. You don't see that in hardly any movie. Because that's one of the funnier things about like sex in like most movies. Like I'm not talking about erotic movies. It's just movies that have sex. You know, but usually they like to show like the finishing, but it's like the guy finishes, but it doesn't do anything. He just gets up and it's over. It's like it went somewhere. You either, you know, there's got to be some cleanup or something involved here, people.
Yeah, he made a mess somewhere.
Yeah, I also love guys in movies that.
Oh, we lost another viewer.
Do they not have underwear, or do they just can't find it? Because how many movies have you seen where the guy gets up from sex naked and pulls on pants without underwear? Like, it's just always not have underwear. Like, I never do that. You ever put jeans on without underwear? God, it feels weird. It feels really weird.
Not jeans.
Yeah, jeans are like the only pants I wear these days. Yeah, it's not like putting on pajama pants.
Right.
Yeah, but you see it a lot in movies. The guy will have like a pair of jeans or I don't know, some other pants that's, you know, everyday use pants, not like weird, not like home snuggling around pants. I mean, go out, walk on the street pants, and they'll often just pull them right up over their bare ass. It's like, that's got to be so uncomfortable, dude.
That is true. I guess in the heat of passion, he lost his underwear.
Do they feel it's anticlimactic to show the guy pulling on his boxers or briefs first? I don't know, but
yeah.
But yeah, so that's one thing. It's the same thing. I mean, if we're gonna get gross here, it has nothing to do with sex, but it's the same thing where sometimes they show people like that are on the toilet, and then they just sort of get up and they don't do any wiping or anything. It's like they're done. Yeah. It's like, and I get it. I'm not saying we need wiping scene in movies, but I just mean don't show them there in the first place. Otherwise, you're just gonna put that in my head. I'm like, they just got up and went. You know. now I can't stop thinking about it. And then, you know, then Jason cuts their head off and they die anyway. But
Yeah, that is true. We need like a 5-minute wiping scene. Come on.
I mean, don't show it, but just show the motions so I know what's happening, you know?
Yeah.
Tasteful wiping scene. Oh, God.
Tasteful wiping. I guess we're already kind of off topic a little bit anyway, Jake. I hadn't heard that.
Oh, what's this? Oh, the cult leader?
Yeah, I don't know that I knew that movie was being made.
I could see it. Yeah, I mean, Leo's one of those guys where I would just believe in him. You know, I believe in him. I think he can do it. And at the same time, you know, it's different. In certain senses, when you're casting somebody as a real life person, it really matters how much they look like them. I don't know how much it matters in the case of an insane cult leader that led a bunch of people to their deaths.
Just put some dark sunglasses on him, and he'll look just like him.
Yeah.
Sideburns.
Because, I mean, I get when they made the Elton John movie, Rocket Man, it was important that Taron Egerton looked a bit like young Elton, and he basically does. You know,
sounds like him, too. Yeah.
Oh, I love his voice. It's interesting that he sounds like him, like from a different, it's like an alternate universe Elton John almost. I just rewatched that movie. I think I said I've been listening to some Elton John lately. But yeah, I think when you're like doing that kind of celebrity, you do want at least a pretty good resemblance. I don't know how much, but then again, maybe that's not what he meant. Maybe he didn't just mean looks, because I mean, it is true. If you're gonna be Jim Jones, you have to project a certain energy and blah blah blah. You know, I've seen a lot of footage of him. I've watched documentaries. You know, I've seen a lot of footage of him.
Hell, you got Leo, man. It doesn't matter.
I mean, Leo's a really good actor. I think he can do it. Yeah.
I was trying to say who's directing that. It says from the writer of Venom. That's not specific enough.
Isn't that a household name by now?
Oh, wait. Adam No, that's a different one. Jennifer Lawrence is going to... Oh, fuck. I don't know. It says Adam McKay. That can't be right.
Isn't he a comedy guy?
That's what I thought, too.
Take a look here. Film. Oh, this is everything about upcoming. This is stuff that's already out. Funny, I just watched on Crave. They had a documentary series called Dark Side of the 90s, and each episode would talk about something like that. And I just watched the cult one, which talked about the Branch Davidian people at Waco, and also their much more peaceful contemporaries. Those idiots that thought aliens were coming down for them. Heaven's Gate,
yeah.
No, or the Heaven's Gate, yeah. They kind of were like the template for like all like jokes about cults for the next few years, because they all had like weird haircuts and dressed up strange and watched Star Trek together, and they were very quiet and polite to everybody, and then they just sort of politely committed suicide. You know, they weren't a trouble causing cult like a lot of those. You know, they weren't stockpiling weapons.
No, right.
They weren't screaming about the apocalypse or Jesus or anything. They were just like, we think the aliens are going to come when we leave our vehicles, meaning their bodies behind, and that's what we're going to do. I mean, it's still a tragedy, and so many people died, I think, needlessly. But you know,
well, they were really trying to be asexual.
That was the other thing too. Yeah, that was the other thing, right? They all became completely celibate, being asexual.
And the men castrated themselves as well.
Not all of them, but yeah, the really committed ones. I think all the ones that died did. Yeah. But yeah. So that's why I think that was a more wholesome cult, because there really was no ulterior motive there, where you have somebody like David Koresh, where like it was all about the sex, right? He could have sex with anybody he wanted. He dissolved marriages. He had sex with girls as young as like 12 or something like that. It was just it was all okay. You know, you guys can't have sex, but I can. It's interesting when you think about a cult leader like him, because I think there's three ways to look at him. One, he was just a con man. He lied his ass off and got away with it. Two, he was completely insane. I think three, which is kind of both, which is he started off as a con man, but over time went nuts because he started to believe in it because everybody else around him did. I think that's kind of what it was. I think he started off, he didn't believe in shit. He just knew he could lie to a bunch of gullible assholes. But then as he gained more power and influence and kept getting away with it, I think he started to really believe his own hype. So,
you know, I'm stupid, I guess. I didn't realize that the Branch Davidians existed before he was their leader. I thought I thought it was based on his name, which I don't even think his real name is David.
No, it was something completely different.
Yeah.
No, he came in and took them over. He like kicked out the old leader or something. I don't know. I mean, he completely changed them. They weren't as militant until he got there. His idea was like stockpiling weapons and everything. You know, people talk about that as like a turning point in American history for some people in '93 at Waco, because even though because they would think about like trust in the government and blah blah blah, the thing with the ATF. Right. I don't know why, because the thing is like, who fired first, them or the ATF? I don't think it matters at all. Do you think it matters? Do you think if you found out the ATF fired first, that changes everything? Because I don't.
At the end of the day, no.
Yeah, but a lot of people, like, they didn't even think about the crazy cult and what he's doing. All they thought was, like, this is proof that, you know, if the government wants to, they'll come and take you out. Like, I was like, yeah, I guess, but you're not taking into account who these people were and what they were doing. And a lot of people, and of course, the whole place burned down. I have to say, like, I don't know who shot first, and I don't have an opinion on that. But I don't believe for a second the ATF set fire to the building. The whole point was they were trying to get kids out. So to me, it was definitely those fuckers that set fire to their own building.
I mean, that's one theory. They set fire to their own building, which I could believe that. But the other thing is they say the tear gas is flammable. I've never heard that before. But
I've never heard that either.
So apparently, like, the tear gas.
So then possibly it just caught fire by accident.
Right.
I mean, I still think that that's more plausible than the ATF specifically trying to burn down the building, which some people to this day still believe. I think that's the funny thing is, like, I hadn't thought about it in years, and I saw a documentary about it about maybe 6 months ago. And of course, like a lot of these documentaries, they did have people that were in the cult, right? And what was interesting about, at least they had about 4 or 5 of them, and at least 2 of them, maybe more. Of course, they had their bias that, of course, the ATF were the bad guys in it. But what was more interesting was when it was all said and done, and this is, you know, this is 30 years later, some of them still believe David Koresh was everything he said he was.
Mm-hmm.
And that is nuts to me. All this time has passed. All the facts have come out, and they're like, yep, he was the Messiah, and you idiots killed him. You fucked us over. He was like Jesus part 2 or whatever. Like, wow, you still live your life thinking that, man. Because, I mean, the other ones are like, yeah, I was in a cult. It was fucked up, and I wanted to believe stuff. I can't believe I believed all that, and I got taken in. But there's people to this day, they're like, he was the one. Like, Jesus.
I mean, what is Stockholm Syndrome, you think?
Yeah, but it's hard to imagine it lasting so much, like, all these years later, right? Like, I can understand, like, maybe it took them a while, but I thought they would get over it. Most of them did, but at least a few, they still believe, like, he was what he said he was. He was the Messiah, second coming, blah, 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 and, you know, you're all going to get punished for what you did to him, you know?
I know a lot of those people, the ones that survived, are like, I don't know, survivor guilt is what you'd call that. Like, they wish they died with the rest of them.
Yeah.
Which is a terrible way of thinking.
It is, but the fact, I think it's also because there were a lot of children that didn't get out, right? There were children that died. Right. So a lot of them think, you know, I should have maybe done more to get them out, and here I am out alive and a child is dead. So I understand that, you know, it's just an awful thing. But yeah, I mean, but for a lot of people that has nothing to do with cults or anything like that, there were just a lot of people, some of these, you know, conspiratorial people, because conspiracies have always been around, but the 90s was when they kind of became a thing, and now they're everywhere because of the internet. But like, yeah, that was like, Waco was like sort of a turning point for certain, like, not a lot of Americans, obviously a small section, but there's a small section of Americans where it's just like, they didn't like the government already, but like Waco was like sort of like a wake up call, pun intended, you know, like, you know, they'll take you out. And I'm just thinking, yeah, but are you doing what these guys were doing? And at the end of the day, I just don't think it matters if they shot first. I mean, they weren't going to come quietly. It was going to be a gun battle one way or another, I feel like, but I don't know. It's just hard for me to sympathize with insane cultists, even though I know some of them, a lot of them were victims. I mean, you're victims, but you're still heavily armed victims, putting like child's lives in danger.
I've seen so many conflicting things. I don't know what to believe about that whole situation. Just a bad deal all around. I didn't realize that the whole reason that they were investigated to begin with is because they were selling fully automatic weapons at gun shows.
Yeah.
Which is highly illegal.
Right, because they had already amassed a lot of weapons, many illegally, but then they had to turn a profit for some of it too, for more of their stuff. So they started selling guns too on the black market. Yeah. So that was what the warrant was for. But like I said, I have no idea who shot first. Like I said, that's one I don't have an opinion on. My opinion on it is just like I don't think it matters who shot first. Like I don't think it all changes everything if the ATF shot first. So I don't know how I'm supposed to sympathize with people that are shielding this maniac that's going around like marrying kids and stuff. And yeah, but anyway. And there you go. So I mean, that seems like a pretty possible explanation that neither side set the fire. That instead the tear gas ignited in some way. That seems more likely because it's like what would be. Although I do understand the motives of them to set fire to their own compound because they knew they were going to die anyway.
That's the narrative they were pushing really hard when it happened. That's all I knew was they were bad. You know, David Koresh was a bad person, and he basically burned his people alive. Is what I thought because that's what the that's what was the main thing being said at the time. Because it was a big deal.
It's still believable. He was definitely like fanatical and wasn't going to be taken alive. Like you could believe it. I don't know if it's happened, but I get it. You could definitely believe that he did. He knows it's the end. Might as well go out that way.
Go out like a martyr,
But yeah, and I mean, it confuses me that to this day there are some people that see him that way. But yeah, but that's one thing that I hadn't thought of until like maybe the last time I watched something on it, where I was thinking like when they talked, and again when I watched The Dark Side of the Night thing, because they talked about like how there'd be certain, not cults or anything, but some of those militia groups and stuff like that distrust the government anyway, and they point to Waco as an example of how like the government could come get you and stuff like that. And I'm like, I guess, but don't you think that was a pretty extreme situation? Like it wasn't the government coming for no reason at all. But anyway. Because, I mean, there was another one around the same time. It wasn't a cult, but what was it, Ruby Ridge or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
See, if you said, like, that's a good example of, like, the government coming... Like, I get that more, because, like, they were still criminals, but they weren't a cult, and I don't think children were in danger. Or they were a family. There might have been kids there.
I forget the specifics on that one.
Yeah, I forget, too. I know one of them got blown away by a sniper, and for a long time the sniper didn't face any sort of like discipline or anything. But I just mean that happened around the same time. It was also like early 90s. But I mean, to me that at least makes a little more sense. Not that I'm necessarily 100% on that side, but I'm just saying I get that as an example better than Waco, because to me Waco was just an insane cult situation. I don't think it proves anything that the government's going to come kick your door down, because this wasn't somebody's door. This was a compound for a cult that was stockpiling and selling weapons illegally. That's a big difference between, I don't know, the average person. But I get it too, because some people, they have like these thoughts and ideas about the government. They hate it already anyway. So yeah, it all fuels into that. But yeah, Jim Jones. I mean, that whole thing. I mean, they left the States. They went down to South America.
Yeah.
Made their own little village.
Yeah, those people like basically sold all their possessions and gave them money. That's how they were able to afford all that.
Yeah.
It's
too bad they didn't do better research. Not that it would have lasted anyway, but it turned out like where they were was like mostly harsh jungle, pretty difficult to live in, and also had soil that was no good for like growing stuff. So they were, even if like they didn't all die right then, they were in a lot of trouble. It was not a well thought out plan. And that guy they killed is still, was he a congressman?
Some sort of politician, yeah, pretty high up.
He's like a congressman or something. He's like to this day, he's the only one to ever get killed in the line of duty in the U.S. history.
That's why they did the Kool-Aid, right? Because that happened. They knew they were about to get, or he knew they were about to get shut down.
Yeah, because once they killed that guy, they knew.
Yeah.
it didn't matter what country they were in. The U.S. would send in the, I don't know, troops or whatever. I think so, Jake. I would, I'm not saying all militias are cults or not, but there, there is a good intermingling of them, right? There might even be a situation where a cult might reach out to a militia for like protection or to get guns or weapons or whatever like that, or training. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean, Alaska's a weird place anyway. With the it's like what, like 80% men, something like that. Like it's a very low percentage of females there.
I don't think I knew that. Wow.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
So all the men go insane.
Well, because you've got the 24 hours of daylight, for periods of time. Some of the country.
Yeah. Let's talk about daylight because I just lost mine. Fuck. Daylight savings. Now the sun goes down at like 10 to 5. And I get to look forward to that for the next 3 months.
I hate it.
And I'm a nighttime person. But I still appreciate daylight. Like I just can't say like the days are already getting shorter enough naturally, and then we throw daylight savings into it. Yeah, I gained an hour of sleep, but who cares?
Can we really get rid of daylight savings time? Come on. I mean, the
It's
days
funny.
get shorter naturally anyway. You don't need to change the out.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any states that don't use it? Because here, Saskatchewan doesn't use it. Saskatchewan doesn't use it. Saskatchewan is mostly farmers, and they're like, this fucks with us too much, so we're just not doing it.
I thought it was for the farmers. I thought that's the whole purpose of it.
I don't know. That's the Saskatchewan stance, so I don't know. So, depending upon the time of year, Saskatchewan might be 3 hours ahead of, not ahead, behind me, or 4, I think.
Let's see. Hawaii, Arizona, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands.
Like, yeah, Hawaii and U.S. Virgin Islands, sure, they're geographically somewhere else. But Arizona, that's funny. So Arizona's like our Saskatchewan. They're smack in the middle, and they just don't care. And I kind of salute them, because I don't like it.
No.
I mean, Alaska's big, but it's isolated, right? I mean, even the big cities are isolated, so you can understand why crime could thrive in a place like that. It's not a place I'm ever interested in going.
Where, Alaska?
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see glaciers and stuff, but I don't have to go to Alaska to see that. I could go to, like, Alberta or British Columbia. I have never seen a glacier. I've seen icebergs, but not glaciers.
It's not as crazy. I was thinking the gender ratio. It's like 97% to 1.
But Alaska had one of those serial killers in the 70s. I mean, there's so many. Remember, he was the guy that would hunt the women for fun. He'd take them out to like his cabin, and then he'd give them a head start to run in the woods, and then he'd take his rifle and hunt them. The movie, Nick Cage did a movie about that called The Frozen Ground. His name was like Radar or Raymer or something. But yeah, that's what he did for fun in Alaska. He abducted women and then hunted them for sport.
Robert Hansen?
Oh, maybe it's Hansen. I thought it was Raymer or Raider. Hold on. Let's get the... And I can't remember if Nick Cage played the killer or if he played the cop going after him. It's Nick Cage's directorial debut.
Oh, man. I think that part was made for Nick Cage.
Yeah, it's Robert Hansen. John Cusack played him. Robert Hansen. 50 Cent is in it, so you know it's good. 50 Cent is the only black guy in Alaska. I know there's black people in Alaska.
You said it before I did. So.
Yeah. I saw it years ago. I don't really remember it, but yeah. I got his name mixed up because that's Robert Hansen. But yeah, that was his thing. Was that he would abduct women and then take them out to like a cabin. Oh, he'd rape them first, of course.
Of course.
But then he'd set them free so he could go hunting them. Killed at least 17. Yikes. Because again, it was the 70s and it was pretty easy to get away with stuff then.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about the 70s and 80s and the golden age of the serial killer and how easy it was to do those things back then.
Was it just the advent of DNA that put a stop to all that? Like maybe people that potentially would have been notorious serial killers didn't have the opportunity. They were caught before.
That's a big part of it. And some of it is, like I said, just how society's changed. Like eventually people were more wise to serial killers. So, back in like 1975, nobody cared about like hitchhiking. Nobody thought that was dangerous. And things like cameras, of course. Now there's cameras in a lot more places.
That's true.
Sometimes like somebody kills somebody and you can get like footage of them on like a camera at a gas station on a highway or something. But, back then they didn't have the cameras. So that's a big part of it. Yeah, the isolation's a big thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, places like Alaska are no joke. You have to have the right temperament to live in places like that. Those far northern places.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of the cold. So
I don't mind the cold as long as I can get out of it. Like, I don't care how cold it gets outside as long as when I come home, my fucking heat works.
Right.
Yeah, Like right now, just like last year, like last November, I'm sure I bitched the whole time, was the warmest November ever recorded in Nova Scotia. And I think this year they're going to break the record. It was like 15 degrees today or something. And I want some cooler weather, but yeah. But I mean, again, I don't live in the prairies or the far north, so we don't get those brutally cold days. I mean, every once in a while we might get 1 or 2 in a year. But now, like, I just hate this really warm November. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I know I'm fine going out in the cold and stuff. I just don't want the cold to follow me home.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find cold is easy to endure as long as you know you can get out of it. But I mean, if you have to stay out in it, that's no fun. I remember back in 2008, I was like homeless for like a few days. Obviously my choice. I have a family, but I was being kind of crazy. And I was like homeless. And that was like May. And like, man, the nights were cold. I was like wandering around all day.
I would think so, Jake.
I think so too, because I mean, almost all the most prolific and brutal ones, that was their main thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually pretty rare to have like an actual serial killer that doesn't have like sex tied into it at some point.
Right.
Even the ones that don't necessarily do a lot of raping. In fact, some of them were like impotent, so they couldn't physically rape somebody, so they just had to sort of get it through just sheer violence.
That was part of it.
Like that.
They were angry, they were impotent.
Right. Because I think that's that guy that killed so many people in Russia in the 70s and 80s. I think he was impotent, and that was part of it. Made a good movie about. Yeah, I think so. There's a good movie about him, an HBO movie from like the 90s.
Oh yeah. Donald Sutherland, I believe.
Yeah, Donald Sutherland. Yeah, it's good. This is like something zero. I don't know. Anyway, it's a good movie. Anyway, it's about him. But yeah, I think that was his deal. I don't think he was impotent there at some point. I don't think he was physically capable of like raping women. So in like frustration and rage, he killed them. Because that was the best he could hope for. But yeah, I would think so. It's pretty rare. I mean, that's one of the shifts you have to see though. Because like nowadays, we talked about before, like spree killers are bigger. Probably because it's harder to be like that. And spree killers generally are shooting people from a distance. And I mean, I guess if you're wired a certain way, you can still derive sexual pleasure for it, but it's much less hands-on, right? It's not like getting up close and strangling somebody or stabbing somebody.
Right. I was trying to... Did we do that movie on this show? Citizen X?
No. Oh, Citizen X. I was saying zero. No, we didn't. I wonder... I think I still have access to it because it's an HBO movie.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I don't really know that we could talk about it.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, sort of a procedural show, just showing all the massive mistakes the government made. Right? It was their refusal to even admit there was a serial killer because they're pushing the whole thing. They're saying, "Oh, serial killers don't happen here in Russia. They're a Western phenomenon. That's a capitalist thing. Our society doesn't produce serial killers." And there were obviously investigators that knew that wasn't true, and they were trying, and they were getting thwarted by like red tape and stuff like that at the top. But I mean, yeah, so many people died that didn't need to die because of the government's stance on that.
There was a few serial killers in South America that they were so prolific, killing like 150 girls, and because what they would do is they would go around to different countries. They're relatively close together, and though they weren't communicating with each other, so that's how they were able to get away with it for so long.
It's just so easy to slip between the borders. Probably not much security there. People crossing borders.
It's the
some crazy ones.
Monster of the Andes, Pedro Lopez, still alive.
Jesus.
Confessed to 350. I think he's up for parole coming up.
Well, good luck.
Seriously. Oh no, he was released.
He was released?
In 98. He was released, and they disappeared.
Why on earth would they release somebody? Jesus. I mean, even if they could only prove some of the murders, it's still... Because, I mean, I get it. They confess to a lot of murders, but not all of them can be accounted for. But I just mean multiple murders.
Good behavior. That's why he got released.
That's one hell of a justice system. I mean... I can be pretty liberal about some of these laws and saying, yes, in certain circumstances, it does more good to have the criminal see if they can be rehabilitated. But, it's hard to have that stance when you're talking about, like, a prolific serial killer.
So, just, guys, if you want to kill 300 children, do it in Ecuador.
Jesus, that's some system you got, Ecuador. Fuck.
You think about someone who does not need to go back in the population. This guy.
Jesus, that is really upsetting.
Guinness Book.
He disappeared, but why would he leave the country? If he gets caught again, I guess he gets a slap on the wrist.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to Guatemala. Screw you guys. I hear they have lots of kids.
Robert Hansen was sentenced to 461 years on top of a life sentence without the possibility of parole. So,
is he still alive in prison?
He died in 2014 in prison.
These guys usually live pretty long. Like, I mean, they usually live out a pretty long life in prison. Like,
yeah, he did. I mean, he was caught in 83 and lived to 2014. So that's a long time as a high-profile prisoner.
Exception of a Jeffrey Dahmer who was murdered in prison, or Richard Ramirez who cancer, some sort of disease got him.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what got Robert Hansen too, but he was 75.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well.
Anyway, we always have our various serial killer discussions. This is yet another, like most of Cronenberg's movies, this is like, it doesn't make a point of it, but it's clearly set in Toronto. It doesn't hide that it's Toronto. You have the Ontario. I love the idea of a shared Cronenberg universe because I love how fucked up Toronto is in Cronenberg's world. It's the same place like where this happened. So there's this weird car crash sex cult running around. There's the Videodrome world. There's the guys that we did Dead Ringers and their weird gynecologist practice. I love the idea that that's all like happening in Toronto.
Well, he loves Toronto, and that's where he's based. And this movie, like, most of the shots were filmed like no less than or no more than 10 minutes away from his production. His,
Yeah.
His office. So,
But I mean, most of it, like most of the stuff he takes on, I mean, it works. You don't
Oh, yeah.
it's not like this movie needs like an exotic setting or a really specific thing. Like it works in kind of any sort of like North American city. Toronto's as good as any other. Same thing with the others. Really, it's like even though it is Toronto, it doesn't have to be. But it's like it doesn't have to be New York or Chicago or LA either. Like it is in so many movies.
It's just city. Insert
it's city.
large metropolis. Yeah.
Right. There's no like shots of the CN Tower.
But he doesn't make any, attempt to disguise it either, as a lot of films do that do film in Toronto.
Yeah, because usually they do try to like make a point that maybe it's New York or something like that, right? Or at least an American city. So that's one thing that appeals to me too. Is like he's not really specifically saying it's Canadian, but it clearly is. It's just it is what it is. But yeah, since so many of his movies are in Toronto, I just love this alternate universe Toronto where all the stuff he had really happened. It's so crazy.
Oh man, I need to go and scope out some of these filming locations. That would be amazing. Need to find my passport
for Cronenberg.
Yeah, I'd go look at all this stuff, man. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because one of the things I liked about Videodrome is like it shows some of like the sort of like grittier areas of Toronto, which has some really good like urban decay in it, which I like. Because I don't even know if that's something that some of the American public realizes. Like, I mean, I'm okay. I like the Michael Moore the famous Michael Moore documentary, Bowling for Columbine, and he does a whole section where he like is in Canada and he's showing how different we are in some ways and blah blah blah, and that's all well and good and a lot of it's true. But at one point he's like, "This is what passes for a ghetto in Toronto." It's like, or in Canada, it's like, no. We have worse neighborhoods than this, Michael, for Christ's sake. But, we got some rough hoods. I mean, obviously not on.
I saw Jason Takes Manhattan. I mean, there's crack vials everywhere.
Yeah, Vancouver's full of toxic waste and heroin addicts. Which was, we talked about that before too, a big phenomenon. Like, I mean, New York was very much from like the 60s through the end of the 80s, very crime infested and all that stuff. But like in the 80s, they kind of almost celebrated it in movies.
Mm-hmm. They do. They really do.
Yeah.
A lot of movies.
We covered a movie about that. We did A Most Violent Year, which was about how, like, I think it was 1980, it was 80 or 81, was like statistically had like the highest crime rate ever. Like they all had super high crime rates, but it was at its absolute apex, I think in 1980 or something like that. It was like a violent crime like occurred somewhere in like the New York boroughs like every 8 seconds or something insane. Like way more crime than the cops could ever deal with. Yeah, I remember actually years ago when the movie came out in 2014. It's funny because I haven't used IMDb. It's funny you showed me the list. It was the first time I'd used IMDb in forever. But I remember being on IMDb reading about that movie, and it was just before they changed it so you could, because people remember could used to be able to comments and stuff on.
Oh yeah.
And there was a thread where people were talking about having lived in New York at that in 1980, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's true." It's like he's like in that year, my bike got stolen, my apartment got broken into, my girlfriend got attacked. Like he named all the stuff. It all happened like just to him. Just this one random guy, and I'm sure he wasn't lying. He said, "Yeah, that all happened to me just in 1980."
Damn.
And he's like, the cops didn't do anything about any of it. Like sometimes they showed up and they said, "Well, there's nothing we can really do," which has kind of been my experience with cops too. Not that I've experienced horrible crime, but anyway.
I know when I was a kid growing up, that's all you heard was what a cesspool New York was.
Yeah.
But then I guess Giuliani got in there and cleaned it up and. They bust all the homeless people out.
Yeah. I mean, Giuliani kind of came in on the tail end of it and kind of took credit for it, right? Because it was the mayor before him. He was the black mayor. He was, I wish I could say better. I just remember he was black. He was the mayor of New York in the early 90s. Hold on, I'll find his name. Let's see here. Just want to get his name right for the sake of Sake of being accurate, blah blah blah. Big list of mayors. David Dinkins.
Okay, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, David Dinkins was mayor from 90 to 93, which is when really that started. So it was already kind of well underway when Giuliani came in. I'm sure his administration or however the fuck it works, it contributed to, but it was really...
So he got the credit then. Giuliani got the credit for doing it.
Not entirely, but I think for a lot of people, that is sort of how they remember, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, that's...
But it was really this David...
yeah.
It was really this David Dinkins guy that was... I mean, again, I don't know how responsible a mayor is for this, but, because it's a big project. It involves a lot of people, right? Like, But, I mean, I would say the mayor who's most responsible is David Dinkins. And then Giuliani, it was already well in progress when Giuliani came in, which I'm sure led to him getting quite a bit of credit. It's like everybody praised Giuliani after 9/11, but I'm thinking all he did was do what any mayor, I don't care if you're the mayor of the smallest podunk town in the world, full of pumpkin bumpkins, and you never have to do anything, and you can walk around barefoot. I bet you would know how to say the right things after something like 9/11. That's all he did. He just said all the standard stuff you should say, we're gonna be strong and come together. And I mean, what else would you fucking say? Is the mayor gonna go oh no, oh my god, we should all panic and we should all freak out and fight each other? And people are like, yeah, he really showed leadership. I'm like, I guess he did, but I mean, he just followed, if there's a handbook, he just followed it pretty much. But anyway, I know it's easy to take shots at him now because in the last few years he's gone kind of insane, but maybe he always was. I don't know. It's not something I kept I kept tabs on. But anyway. But yeah, but a lot of the movies in the 80s, they seem to really celebrate that about New York. They even wink at it, or I've said this before, but in the second, because it wasn't just about the crime, too, it's about how New Yorkers are rude. Because remember, in the second Ghostbusters movie, the whole thing about the negative energy taking over the people. He's like, we need to fight it with positivity. He's like, you're telling all these New Yorkers they had to be nice to each other? Right. It's that's not, it's rude and proud of it,
Go
so I don't know if that's
something.
Yeah. And again, when I was in New York in 2013, I was only in Manhattan. I was in the very touristy New York, right? I wasn't, in the Bronx or Queens or like that. But my time in touristy Manhattan was very touristy in that everybody was super nice. I think it was probably because it's a big part of their job. Everywhere I went, people were incredibly nice. I mean,
what year was
again,
that?
some of the 2013.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, you ought to expect it because some of these were high profile places. I was in the NHL store and some big Disney store, and I was briefly in Macy's, which I was kind of unimpressed with. I always thought Macy's would have been cooler, but I was in some of the, and everybody, super nice. But even some of the smaller places.
I've been, a good many places, and I think there's assholes and nice people everywhere.
Oh, for sure.
So I think people get a bad rap for that sometimes.
Yeah. But anyway, that was part of an identity that they almost sort of celebrated in the 80s. It's New York is violent as hell and kind of polluted and people are rude. And that's the New York experience. And I'm like, yeah. But yeah. What's the Toronto experience? It's just we pretend we're New York. We're just like New York, but without all the stuff.
Without all the bad shit.
Or good shit. We're just kind of bland. I don't know.
Oh man, I watched.
People think I like Toronto because I was a Maple Leafs fan, but I don't give a shit about the city. I've been to Toronto a couple times, and I don't care. It makes no impact on me whatsoever. It's fine, I guess. It's our biggest city, so it obviously has a lot of stuff compared to say here. But I don't care. I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah, I've heard it's a fun city. I'd like to visit. For one, because it's probably the closest big city to me. So.
Which one?
Toronto?
No, there's got to be big cities closer to you. Or
no,
you mean Canadians,
right?
Yeah, that's right. Plus, everything goes through there anyway. Like I said, even though Halifax is closer to New York than Toronto is, I still had to fly through Toronto first, which is so fucking stupid.
That is stupid, the way they lay that out.
I mean, I don't see how that helps. It's a waste of fuel. It's a waste of time. Halifax, airport is still technically an international airport, but like years ago, it's been like downgraded. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Like when people, I mean, I said this way back at the time when people were like praising, and I mean Canadians, people I knew, they were praising Giuliani's response, and I was like, and that's how I felt at the time. I was like, yeah, but I mean, isn't that like the same thing you would have said or done? I don't think it takes like great, intelligence or fortitude or anything. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, that was kind of my attitude at the time when people were sort of like praising him. I was just like, it could have been any mayor. Any mayor would have said the same stuff. Because what else would you say? But yeah,
just because he was mayor at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things about being a politician, right? Like, if some big disaster happens on your watch, I mean, depending on what it is, like something like 9/11, you can't blame that on the mayor of New York, right? People hijacking planes in other cities and crashing them into the buildings in your city, there's no way you can spin it that that's the mayor of New York's fault. So obviously that's a terrible tragedy, but it also politically can help you out because now you're the mayor in the time of crisis and stuff like that. So it's, yeah. So I don't want to say this in a weird, insensitive way, but I'm just saying, like, there's certain tragedies that would happen in a city where it would look really bad for the mayor because it'd be like, this happened on your watch, but when our ideal tragedy will be one that, they can't be blamed for.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's weird mixes of it, like Hurricane Katrina, right? Like, on the one hand, you can't blame anybody for a hurricane because that's nature. But on the other hand, you can still say, well, we should have been better prepared and had a better response and all that stuff, right? But when you have something like as crazy and out of nowhere as September 11th,
right,
you can't be like, damn you, Giuliani, you were asleep at the switch while these planes came down. Like, what are we paying you for? Like, yeah, because like nobody's gonna,
someone probably said that exact thing.
Well, yeah, maybe somebody still did.
Well, you got to blame someone, right?
Right, and politicians are obviously the good targets for blame. But yeah, but yeah. So depending on the nature of a tragedy could actually politically help a mayor or somebody like that. It just all sort of depends upon the nature of it. And I think that's sort of what helped make his image in his career. I mean, it's already pretty good to be mayor of New York. New York's the big famous city. I don't know what your salary is, but it's probably a lot.
Have to be. I mean, at least $500,000 at the least.
Yeah.
Probably way more than that.
I know, because like the official salary of the president isn't actually that high, right? Like I think it's like 450,000 US, or maybe it's a little higher now. But it was still under $1 million and things like that. But I mean, Trump was already rich outside, but plenty of other presidents became rich just because they're presidents. Obama writes a book and it's boom, way more money than he ever made being paid, to do the job.
Or the speaking engagements. I know the Clintons.
Oh, right, those speaking engagements.
Tons of money off that stuff.
They'll make like $50,000 just to show up.
Just to go to go to a college and talk for half hour, however long it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you do once your term is up as president. That's what you go on your tours and your speaking engagements and rack up the money that way. The political machine. Who is mayor of Toronto? I don't care, actually. And that's the other thing. I guess that's the other thing that put Toronto on the map for a while, is because they had that crazy mayor, Rob Ford.
Oh yeah, the crack smoking guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, his brother,
wild, man.
His brother's still around and in politics and saying he's not as crazy, but you can definitely tell that it's his brother because he says Rob, or I can't remember which one he wanted for. He still says stupid stuff all the time. But yeah, that guy was pretty intense. They made an entire episode of Brickleberry about him.
Oh, really?
I mean, I would actually say that the Toronto of Scott Pilgrim is in some ways, I mean, you have to take out the magic realism, but accurate. It's not something I would have experienced because I didn't grow up there. But I mean, they did show a layout of the city geographically, if you're paying attention. And also sort of like how, like a lot of cities, it had like sort of an underground music scene full of bands and stuff like that. So Scott Pilgrim's not as, even though it's crazy and full of, wacky fantasy stuff, it still is Toronto. But I mean, I don't know. To me, Toronto's mostly kind of a bland city. It's interesting because I guess this is the case with most big cities, but you have your downtown and all your big buildings and shit. But then you just have this massive area surrounding it full of neighborhoods and places, and they're not technically Toronto, but they're considered part of the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. So I don't know. And I don't know really anything about that. I mean, the CN Tower is cool. I like going up. I liked going up in it. If you're afraid of heights, maybe skip it. You probably don't want to jump on that glass floor, but I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
The base of the CN Tower has this cool. I don't even know what it's like now because I haven't been there so long. But when I was there, it was like a weird kind of Palladium place. It was like a big arcade full of sci-fi things and stuff. I played Duke Nukem like with VR, meaning I played Duke Nukem with the goggles on, and things like that. Because I was in Toronto twice, when I was 7 and when I was 14. So 1990 and 1997. So I haven't been there in a long time, but I mean, it's a lot like a lot of big cities. It's very multicultural. Yeah, exactly, Jake. And they did do that. They did shoot in places like that place where the guy is skateboarding. That is a place where people would skateboard. Some of that stuff. I need to watch it again. I own it. It's one of my favorite movies. I just don't watch it. That's another case of like I own all the original comics in their original black and white, but then they released them in color volumes that I only got 2 of, and now those hardcover color volumes are gone, and now they have soft cover large cover color volumes. And like, I don't know. I'd like to get them, but I don't like buying stuff I already own, so I can never buy these things fast enough. But anyway, people have heard me bitch about this many times, but that's my main problem with books and comics is like, I just want my series to match, and they never do. I can't buy them fast enough. My Harry Potters don't match, nothing matches. My Narnia books don't match. I could go on.
Go out of print.
But, Toronto's fine. Just like it's like, I'm sure... of course, the U.S. you have multiple targets because you have how annoying L.A. can be too. But I'm sure it's fashionable to bash places like Toronto and L.A. because they think they're so great and everything. It's kind of the same thing here, right? A lot of Canada will bash Toronto because they think they're better than us. They're the biggest city,
right?
Like I said, they think they're New York, but they're not. That kind of stuff. They think of themselves as the center of the universe in Canada. What bothers me, and I'll very quickly, this has less to do with Toronto, is the Western provinces. They have a real hate for Toronto, but what bothers me about that is how we don't exist to them, because you'll hear people out west complain about Eastern bias and how much they can't stand the East and the East media, but they just mean Toronto. They just mean Ontario. Like, I'm much further east, but we don't matter. We're small, so we don't matter. So that bothers me. Like, if you're from Alberta, like, I don't even exist to you. Like, when they say damn the East, they don't mean me. They mean Ontario, which is hundreds of miles to the west of me. But that's what they mean by the East when everybody talks about the East. We're small. We don't have big, huge cities. We don't matter. We don't have an NHL team, stuff like that. So they talk about the East Coast bias. By the coast, they might mean New York. They don't mean us. We don't matter. But no, I wouldn't. I just don't want to live in any big city, really, except in Japan. Don't want to live in any big North American or European city. They're all fun to visit. I certainly love visiting them. I liked visiting New York. I would love to see Chicago someday. Big city with lots of cool stuff, museums and all sorts of things. But yeah, lots of things that I'd love to visit. Just, I wouldn't want to live there.
Sure. Yeah. Let me show you some a quote here from Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert did not like the film,
but he respected it, right?
Yeah. 3.5 out of 4. Exactly.
He said something like he doesn't necessarily like it, but he respects it, which is kind of how I feel. Like, I can't say I enjoy watching Crash. As far as I know, that's true.
How does he know that? I'm sure it exists,
If it exists, they're doing a pretty good job of being safe.
Yeah.
Because, you always hear about car crashes and stuff, but you never hear any angle about it having anything to do with a sexual fetish. I mean, you could say that could be hard to tell if you just a bunch of people crash in a car and nobody knows why or what happened. I get it, but at the end of this movie, we have a couple making out on the side of a crash. The cops and EMTs are eventually going to find them. I mean, that's the other thing, right? The cops were already sniffing around Vaughn because Vaughn was known for his
Right.
crazy, reckless driving. It's never proven, but they say they were looking into it for hitting a pedestrian. And Ballard says something very true. He says, well, he doesn't have an interest in pedestrians, which is true. It's all about people in cars. Pedestrians don't matter. So it seems unlikely that Vaughn hit a pedestrian. But on the other hand, if Vaughn was fucking around trying to hit some other driver, he might have accidentally hit a pedestrian. So that goes unsolved.
Ebert goes on to say that Cronenberg has made a movie that is pornographic in form, but not in result. Crash is like a porno movie made by a computer. It downloads gigabytes of information about sex. It discovers our love affair with cars and combines them in a mistaken algorithm. The result is challenging, courageous, and original, a dissection of the mechanics of pornography. I admired it, although I cannot say I liked it.
Yeah, see, you're admired, respected. That's kind of how I feel. I mean, it's being a little flowery there with the computer algorithm stuff, but I mean, I get what he's saying. He's just saying, you're taking two things that people think of as unrelated and just sort of smashing them together. And
I think there are absolutely people that have this fetish.
now, right, you told me you saw a show called My Strange Addiction, so let's talk about that. And in this episode, this episode featured a man that was sexually attracted to the cars themselves. It wasn't the violence of car crashes; it was the cars themselves, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had sex with the car, and in the episode, I'm sure for drama's sake, I think this was like Arkansas somewhere in the southern United States, right. And the guy comes out to his father, that he's having sex with the car. But it's so funny because the guy had so much more trouble telling his dad that it was a male car. So he's in a homosexual relationship with the car versus I'm just fucking my car.
Right. Which really speaks to his psychosis, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody thinks of cars. I mean, people will joke about cars having genders, Often you might refer to it as a he or she. We will do that, but not in a we can have sex with them type way, right? So the idea, his psychosis is so far gone to me that he's like, I have to tell my dad that I do this, but how is he going to react to it? Like, your dad would not ask you. Your dad would not have the follow-up question, well, what sex is the car? Yeah. Because that's what not what normal people think. So I love that it's a problem he's created himself.
I'm okay with you having sex with your car, but I didn't raise no gay.
Yeah, so, and he feels like he has to tell him that part because logically, I mean, if you're having sex with the car, what is the car's gender? You just said car, so that's pretty funny that he thought that that was required in divulging the information. I mean, fuck. So, I mean, what part of the car does he penetrate? Does the exhaust pipe? That sounds disgusting.
That's what you would immediately think, right? But
I mean, is he just sort of humping it?
He kind of gets under it and he kisses the bumper and the car is over him. He just kind of grinds up against the, I guess, chassis, whatever part of the car you would call that.
He's under it. Okay, that's pretty submissive.
Yeah, so it's like
the car. So does that mean all the cars are male? Or does it just mean his cars?
His car.
Right.
It's almost like an elaborate way to say I'm gay, Dad. Yeah,
I guess, but I mean, I'm so unfamiliar with the idea of somebody being sexually attracted to a car. I mean, is he sexually attracted to men or humans at all? Like, we don't know, do we?
Yeah, there's a name for that, being sexually attracted to like inanimate objects.
Yeah, I was going to bring up something about that, by the way, Jake. Yeah, because I remember that had been brought up in a few things. It's even in the Neil Gaiman novel and then later show American Gods, where the main character, while he was in jail, his wife or girlfriend was cheating on him with his best friend, and they died in a car accident, and she was like blowing him during it, and she bit off his penis as they died, in the crash.
Yeah, the World According to Garp has that as well.
Yeah. Because that is the one thing you can say about sex in cars. It's true, like people have sex in cars a lot. I've had sex in cars. I think it's kind of typical. I mean, when I was a teenager, I lost my virginity in a car. I mean, I think that's pretty typical. A lot of people do. Where else are teens going to go? It's hard, you know. But I'm certain I haven't had sex in a car in a long time, and I don't miss it. I'm like, not like, darn, I wish I could get back in the back seat. I mean, I assume if a situation came up, I would go for it just because sex. But on the way, it's not something I miss. It's much better to have proper room, I think. I mean, technically, I guess there's room in a car, but I don't know. I wouldn't think of it as ideal. I love that recurring anal sex joke in Mallrats. I'm gonna screw her somewhere uncomfortable, like in the back of a Volkswagen. Oh, did he? Well, I'm sure Dane Cook liked that because I remember that like he got like her phone and saw the last stuff she was like texting before she met him. And one of the texts he sent was like, his erect cock. And I guess they wanted to like show that she wasn't going for just anything because it was a very impressive one, right?
Oh,
yeah. That's in the first episode of American Gods. Is they give him her phone as she's dead, and he's scrolling through the text and he sees that she's flirting with the friend and they're talking about doing it and stuff. And then he sends her a dick pic, and it's a very impressive dick. So if that's supposed to be Dane Cook, I'm sure it probably wasn't the real Dane Cook, but I'm sure he probably enjoyed that. His character was well endowed before he fucking died for the 5 seconds he's in it. Because why not? I own that book and I've read it a couple times. I don't love it the way people do. That's the only Neil Gaiman shirt I own too. You've seen it on the show. I have an American Gods shirt for the book. And yet, it's probably not even my top 5 favorite. It's good though. I like Neil Gaiman's comics a lot more than his novels. Even though his novels are good, I like his comics a lot more. Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about, I've said this before, Jake, but I mean, the most overrated sex to me is easily shower sex. Shower sex looks so great, like on video, like whether it's porn or just a movie, it looks great. But I mean, I've never really enjoyed it. I feel like I have less sensation. If everything's wet, I don't really notice what's supposed to be wet. And then there's the awkward standing and everything like that. Like, I'm not saying I'm against it and would never do it again. I'm just saying I think it's the most overrated of all sex is shower sex. And probably because it is a very sexual, it's a very hot visual, right? It looks really good if you're watching it, but it's not that great having it, at least compared to like sex in other locations. But that's my number one overrated sex place.
Yeah, it's tough to do sometimes too. I like having a bench in there, or sort of a place to sit down or something.
Yeah, I've never had that option. Yeah, I will say another thing about like, again, I'm not trying to get too graphic to people around me, so I won't use me. But I mean, I'm 5'8", which is kind of a middling height, and most of the girls, actually, a lot of the girls I've dated were not that small. I dated several girls who were fairly close in height to me. And that's kind of ideal. It's if one of you is, whether it's the man or the woman, if there's a big height disparity, that kind of limits your positions, particularly standing. But if you're of similar height, it's a lot easier to do like standing sex or like a shower sex. And so I said, even though I didn't even face that problem with the particular partner I had for it, still not my thing.
Yeah.
It looks great though. I get why it's in movies and stuff all the time, because if you're just a what's the word, spectator, it does look very hot and sexy and arousing and all that. But it's definitely the most overrated. Well, I mean, I get the beach sex thing, sand, right? He wants to get sand all over themselves.
It gets everywhere.
Yeah.
No.
Again. Most of these places are still places that I absolutely would if had the opportunity. It's not like I'd be like, no way. I mean, there are places I draw the line, but that's more like, a public thing. Like, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, it'd be so hot if we got caught. No, I don't want to get caught. That's not cool. I did think that a little bit when I was in my second year of university, when I lived in the Roost, because you had to go all the way down in the main building, down into like the basement of the, I don't want to over explain this and take forever, but So the main building on the campus at King's is called the A&A building, and it's very large, and it's like 4 floors. The top floor is the Roost, which was just a small boys-only dorm I lived in the second year. It's on the top of everything. Third floor is the J School. Second floor is like administrative stuff, like the bursar's office. And the first floor is that. But the whole thing is like it's the back of the building goes out into where you have to go down 1 floor and it goes down to where the cafeteria is. But just the front part, all the buildings are connected. It has 1 dorm on one side and 1 on the other, and they're all connected by the basement. So the basement isn't like a floor; it's just like 1 long corridor connecting everything. So if you lived in the Roost or either of the 2 adjoining dorms on either side, you did your laundry down there. So the laundry rooms were like skinny, right? They were barely rooms. You were only a few feet in, and it was off like this just long hall going in both directions. And I don't know why, and I never did, but I used to think that it would be kind of cool to have sex with somebody in there. And I don't know why I thought that, because I mean, I had a dorm room where I did the business. But I mean, I used to think that, but I'm kind of glad I didn't, because you absolutely probably would get caught. Because the thing is, it's not like maybe in some places where a laundry room is like a specific location. If you're going to the laundry room, you're going to the laundry room. Here, it's just on the way. Like people would just pass it going whatever way they're going. But yeah, I love how the buildings are. I love how the buildings are connected in Kings. I got a lot of mileage out of it because in my third year, I lived off campus. My first year living off campus, but I had a security job, and I used to do a patrol at night, walk indoors and check indoors, and it took me all over the whole campus. Again, Kings very small campus, not a big sprawling campus like other places. Small. That was a fun job while it lasted. Because I had to really talk to people or deal with people. Except every once in a while you did a lockout, which is just some idiot, almost always a girl, locked themselves out of their room.
Really?
And you had to go let them in. That was the only time I had to deal with people. The rest was just doing a patrol and locking and checking doors. And I just really loved walking through the empty academic buildings. It's all dark and empty, and there's nobody there. I found it fun. But yeah, for some reason I used to think it would be fun to like have sex on like up against like one of them like washing machines or whatever in there, but no, not really. Like it would have been probably a disaster. So it's for the best that it never happened. And again, why would I? I had a room that would have worked.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's too weird.
I mean, it's not too weird, but there's not much like protection. You have to hope that you're like alone, because like a gazebo's not gonna like shelter you from eyes. Like people, if you're having sex in a gazebo, people from like very far off can see what you're doing. So, I mean, I guess if you're in an isolated place, that works. I mean, we're gonna talk about the most exotic place I had sex was by a waterfall, which sounds really cool, but still, I mean. It wasn't like it's not like we have like this great place to lie down in a blanket and everything like that. It was more sort of like hurry up standing sex, but still it was a nice location and it was very remote. Nobody was going to show up there. You know, you had to go down this whole trail to get to it and stuff, but that was so long ago. That was like 14 years ago, a long time ago. But I mean, that's the thing about movies is movies can always like any kind of sex look appealing, which is what's cool about like a Cronenberg movie, because it's not about making the sex look appealing. In many ways, it's to like put you off sex, and he's good at that in other movies too. But I mean, none so much as this one. Although again, now that I'm watching it, it's not as bad as I remember. Sometimes when you watch a movie that like upset you when you were younger, you have like more vivid, kind of exaggerated memories of it. So I was like watching this one kind of wincing. And then when I watched it, it's like, it's not as bad as like, you know, the memories my brain created of it. I mean, there's still some stuff where I'm just like, I definitely don't like it. But as you said, Jay, the cast really helps because this is a cast that obviously really buys into the whole thing. You know, they're not winking at the camera and they're also not like giving flat performances. Like, I can't believe I'm in this fucking movie. Like I mean, kudos to you, Jake. That's pretty cool. I gotta. Thumbs up, brother. Ugh. Nowadays, I take it anywhere right now. I mean, I'm in such a drought. I don't care where.
Yeah, Elias Koteas is great in just about everything I've seen him in. So he's really was great for the part.
He's Canadian.
Oh, okay. Explains a lot. Cronenberg tries to get Canadian actors if possible.
Yeah. It's interesting how he like has certain actors that he likes to go to again. Obviously, the most Robert Pattinson. I think they were going to do more movies. I don't know really what happened, but obviously the big one was Viggo Mortensen, right? He did several movies with Viggo Mortensen.
I think they're doing a sequel to Eastern Promises.
That'd be cool. Eastern Promises I don't think it's the worst movie I've seen by Cronenberg, but it might be the one that I have like the least like feelings or opinion on. Like, it's a movie. It's kind of how I feel. I don't think anything about it is particularly memorable except that there's a naked fight scene. It's also a lot shorter than I was expecting. Like, when it ended, I couldn't believe that was the ending. I was like, already? That's the end? What? So a sequel seems like a good idea because I didn't feel like things were unresolved. I just thought more was going to happen. It just felt really short. I don't know. It's probably not that short. But
yeah,
sometimes just how stories flow sometimes makes them seem longer than they are, or sometimes even shorter than they are. And I guess that the way it flowed for me was like, it felt like not much had happened by the time it was over. I was like, isn't more going to happen? Again, I need to watch it again. It's been a few years.
Me too. I remember it being a little underwhelming. I mean, I like it, of course. And then the shower scene's great.
Right.
I just felt like, I liked the history of violence so much that
Me too.
Little let down. I mean, not,
even A History of Violence has some graphic sex in it.
It does.
And it's the kind of sex that you don't really necessarily see in a mainstream movie. Like, he and his wife are like on the stairs and he's eating her out from behind, which you just don't see in movies really. And it doesn't really serve any part of the plot that much, but it's a Cronenberg movie, so there's gonna be some sex in there. It's like it's a more straightforward vanilla sort of thing of, here's some sex, later we'll give you some violence. Whereas the sex and violence are combined, but in an unexpected way, because there's no rape in this movie. It's not about anybody forcing somebody to have sex with them or dominating them. It's just about the violence of a car crash and then the sex that follows it in the weird excited haze that these people have. But yeah, it's interesting because it's not something I can relate to. I understand like getting off on danger, but I don't get off on wounds.
Literally.
Oh yeah, and he's literally. give James Spader credit. He's down. He'll do it. And I mean, we talked before again. It's very kind of a nuanced thing, whether it's what kind of, when you're shooting a sex scene in a movie, because I don't know, you want to make it as comfortable as possible for the actors and all that stuff. And it looked like Cronenberg had a pretty good approach. He said something like he actually made sure there were a lot of cameras on it and things so that like there could always be playback on the monitors so the actors could see it. So he said, because at the end of the day, I want them to be happy with how it looks because it's them up there, which is cool, which is kind of a director surrendering a bit of control, which a lot of directors wouldn't do, right? It's like, I don't care what you think that looks like to you. I'm the director. So I think that's kind of nice that he wanted to present them with something that they felt good about. And again, these are not passionate, beautiful sex scenes. These are like weird, kind of perverted, disturbing sex scenes, but it still comes down to the same thing. You've got actors doing nudity and at least some, I mean, yes, it's simulated sex, but some stuff's not simulated.
It's all graphic sex, but I think it's very tastefully done. It's not gratuitous. It's not trying to be pornographic, it's erotic. It's a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of agree that the whole movie has sort of a pornographic feel without, like, it's kind of what Eber said, without really being pornographic, because it is exploitative, but it's exploitative in maybe an unexpected way. Because lots of movies use sex and violence, right? Movies have sex and violence. That's not new. But again, just the way they're used in this movie, it's a different sort of combination. And I don't particularly like seeing it, but I get the point it's being made. I mean, the book itself was fairly influential at the time. It's kind of funny because people don't think of things like books because they're just words written on paper, but it actually had a somewhat of an influence on some of the British music in the 70s because of its lyrical and stylistic influences on the British post-punk scene and the electronics music scene. There was who are they? The Normal. They did an album, might have been called Warm Leatherette, that was directly inspired by the book. Somebody named John Fox did an electronic album called Metamatic that was also inspired by the book. So that's kind of neat. But that's the one thing I'll give I'll give Cronenberg too. This is besides the book. Is just like, I mean, most of the music in his movies was done by, I think, was it Howard Shore?
Yeah.
And Howard Shore is interesting because like he stuck to Cronenberg and did all his movies, but then he went on to have great success doing other stuff. He's the guy that did the music for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is just a wonderful soundtrack.
Oh, the score in this is great.
Yeah, that's always my joke about Spader, Jake. Is like he loves playing like sexual deviants. But the score in this is good. But also just like even the stuff that's not in the score, you can hear like do you ever watch a movie that even though it's not in the score, like this movie makes you think of like industrial music, doesn't it? Doesn't it make you think of like Nine Inch Nails and shit like that? Because you can see how different mediums of art influence each other. You can see in a way how like a film like this, a painting by, I don't know, H.R. Geiger, and a song by like Trent Reznor all have things in common, you know? It's funny, the book, one of the publishers refused to print the book and called Ballard beyond psychiatric help. That's funny.
Sorry, I'm just looking up Dream Lover. I'm not familiar with that one.
I've heard of it, but I don't know it. I've actually, even though I'm well acquainted with James Spader, there's a lot of stuff he's done I haven't seen.
Have you seen Jack's Back?
No, I could see it because it's on Prime. It's one with like something to do with a killer.
It's a Jack the Ripper type thing, yeah.
I see.
I think that's it. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Right.
Well,
take a look at Spader. Because, yeah, there's actually quite a bit of James Spader stuff I have not seen.
Yeah.
Even though he is somebody that I've never seen it. I've heard of it, of course, but I've never seen it.
Oh, that's a great one. Of course.
People talk about White Palace. Never seen that.
Lesson Zero. That's written by Bret Easton Ellis.
Oh, that's the guy that did American Psycho? Right?
Yeah, Bret Easton Ellis. Yeah, that's him.
I haven't seen necessarily his good movies. I've seen Pretty in Pink and Mannequin.
Yeah. A lot of those early movies are really good. Like
I don't remember him in Wolf, but apparently he's in Wolf. He's in Stargate, of course. Crash after this.
Oh, Stargate, yeah. That's when he was becoming bigger.
The Watcher is a horrible, horrible movie. That the makers had to practically like beg Keanu Reeves to do it. I think Secretary is I don't think Secretary quite delivers. He hasn't done a movie since Age of Ultron. That seems kind of weird. His last role was Ultron? I have to say, as much as I like James Spader, that's not really the way I've ever pictured Ultron. I didn't like that it wasn't until the end that they showed him. To me, Ultron doesn't have a mouth that moves. And I don't like that they animated him with a mouth that moved in the movie.
He's doing that TV show right now, so he may be tied up in that.
The Blacklist, right?
Yeah,
The Blacklist.
I've never watched it, but
no, but it's a pretty big deal, yeah.
People like it. I don't have any desire to watch it, but
no, I don't either. Although I just watched the first episode of a show that I think I'm gonna like, called Yellow Jackets. You hear that?
I don't believe so.
It's a pretty good setup, even though it's not necessarily original. So it's set like in 2021, and it's about this group of women. They're like in their 40s, but the whole thing is, most of them don't know. They aren't in each other's lives or anything. They used to know each other. They went to high school together in the 90s, and in 1996, they were on a soccer team that won state. And they were going to go somewhere to play at nationals, and their plane crashed somewhere in somewhere with snow or something. And it clearly, even though they only showed little snippets of it in flashbacks, it clearly led to some insane Lord of the Rings situation, only weirder because it's teenage girls.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's about them now in 2021, the ones that survived. Obviously some didn't. And it's about like how people are starting to like ask more questions because they eventually were rescued, right? And I guess at the time people didn't ask too many questions about what happened. So it's about like some reporter comes sniffing around and stuff. And anyway, it seems pretty interesting. And so the first episode, all the flashbacks, it's full of flashbacks. It's hard because there's a lot of characters and I can't keep track of them. And it's especially hard because you have to keep track of the young version of them and the old version of them. But so I'll have to watch it again. But it seems pretty interesting. And the flashback of the stuff that happened like after the crash, those are just really short snippets. Like you aren't given much context, but it looks absolutely bonkers. So I'm gonna watch the first episode again so I can. But anyway, it seems pretty cool.
Christina Ricci, Juliette Lewis.
Wow. See, I'm so dumb. I don't even recognize them. I guess that's them as the grown-ups.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was on Crave for me. I don't know where it shows up, but it's just the first episode for me. I don't know how fast. But anyway, it's been a while since I've just sort of jumped onto a show not knowing anything about it, but I really enjoyed it. It reminded me a bit of the TV show Arrow in a way, because a lot of that show was about slowly revealing what happened on the island. Although this is a much different thing. This isn't an island, and it wasn't one person alone. But
oh yeah,
because people always say, because people used to say, one of the reasons why Lord of the Flies works is because it's boys. It wouldn't work with girls. I'm like, maybe not with little girls, but it works with high school girls. They'd fucking kill each other.
Oh, they definitely have a hierarchy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely what's going on here, because they seem to have like, it seems, again, you only see the snippets, but like they're wearing like weird animal skins and things on their face. Like clearly they have like weird rituals and all sorts of shit. Like it's only, yeah. Oh, they definitely did. Like
I was going to ask the same thing.
There's definitely a scene that shows that they ate somebody. Yeah, they even though the first episode is very light on stuff that happened, they still did show that. Because it's going to go. They're just going to gradually show us stuff, but it's the first episode. They want to grab you, so yeah, they definitely eat somebody.
Sophia's being
it's gross as hell.
He's for dinner.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because it does show that even before the crash, most of them were not getting along. Like there was a lot of turmoil. I guess because they were taking this way too seriously. I mean, I get it. It's soccer. I don't know. Soccer's cool. I played soccer, but they were taking it really seriously. So they were already like at each other's throats because they were going to the nationals or whatever like that. Anyway, it looks pretty cool.
It's not based on a true story, right?
No.
Okay.
I've never heard of a soccer team of girls that crashed in the 90s.
Because I know that movie Alive, where they crashed in like the mountains somewhere.
That was a soccer team, but they weren't but they weren't teenagers. And they were professional soccer players, and they weren't teenagers. This is high school soccer girls. But anyway, that was pretty cool. I'm definitely going to rewatch the first episode so I can figure out the characters better. Because again, there's quite a few characters, and you have to keep track of two versions of them. You have to keep track of their teenage self and their present self. Although
it's not available.
Died.
Not available for me until the 14th on Showtime.
Yeah, okay, Showtime. Yeah.
I may have to check that out because Dexter has just started back.
Yes, and because of that, that was one of the only shows I ever watched, and I watched all three of the first three seasons, and then I was about midway through the season 4, and I stopped. And even though season 4 was probably the best one, and just like a month or two ago, for the first time in years, I watched Dexter, and I just picked it up in season 4 and watched it straight. Season 4 is great. Apparently, the seasons after that are good, but 4 is really good.
The John Lithgow, the Trinity Killer.
Yeah, it's that arc.
That's
really good.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
amazing
that's a great season. I never watched 5, 6, 7, 8. People say it's all kind of downhill after that there, and it's good.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine with those.
But yeah, the new one, which isn't a full show, it's only like 10 episodes or something. So people are acting like it's a whole new show. It's not. It's like a limited series. It's like 10 episodes, but I don't know. I guess a lot of people didn't like that ending, that he disappeared and became like, speaking of Alaska, I think that's where he is, right? He's like a logger in Alaska or something.
No one liked that ending. Not one person.
Yeah. Well, they're sticking to it by picking up with him in Alaska or wherever the hell he is, somewhere far north. But yeah.
So I may have to check that out on Showtime as well. I may do a month or two, or I may wait till the whole thing gets released and then do like a month and watch it all.
Yeah. I hadn't heard anything about it. I just saw the title and I was like, I don't know. And I saw the picture and I was like, I have no idea what this could possibly be, because it's a picture of one of them when in their adult life where she like is a nurse at a nursing home. It's like, this doesn't look like anything, but I clicked on it and it sort of said vaguely what it was about. And I was like, okay, which is not something I usually do, but I'm glad I did. I enjoyed the first episode, and I'm enticed. James Spader is 61. I mean, James Spader's first role was Endless Love, which, looking back, is the type of movie that would like enrage everybody nowadays. Because Endless Love is about like 15-year-olds just getting it on, and people are like, you can't. And obviously, they don't show it in the movie, but I just mean, like nowadays, you can't even imply it.
That's not realistic. Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah, they made a remake of it a few years ago, but I bet it sucked. But Endless Love made a big impression on me just because it's Brooke Shields. Like early 80s Brooke Shields is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like him and Brooke Shields just like, I mean, they capitalized on Brooke Shields back then. Like between that and Blue Lagoon, like it's Brooke Shields all hot and bothered, getting busy.
What was the movie where she was a prostitute? She was like 13.
Pretty Baby. From 78. It's a good movie. Again, it's something that's uncomfortable for people, but it was a good movie because it's showing because it's set it's like the early 20th century. It's like 1900 something or something like that, right? And they're just showing us as a society was in a lot of ways. Like they were having parties and stuff, like these like men in their 40s, and they were trying to like pick off like girls that are like 12, 13 and stuff. And it's true, it was basically accepted in a lot of places. So I mean, the movie's just telling the story. The movie's not like, isn't that great? And obviously it doesn't have any actual, sex scenes with a minor in it. But I'd like to see it again. I haven't seen it in a long time. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm putting it on my list. It's on US Netflix.
I mean, Brooke Shields did like her ad for what was it, Levi's? I don't know. One of those jeans places. And she was only like 15 then. And they've like plastered her ass all over the place when she was like a minor. So
was it Jordache?
No, it was something better than Jordache.
It might have been Guess.
It was probably a Guess or Levi's or something. It was a high profile one. That's not something I think about too much is the modeling world, but that's another thing. It's kind of the modeling world is a lot like Hollywood and stuff, in they have sort of similar histories. I wouldn't mind seeing like a documentary sort of about that and how that's changed over time. It's not something I think about that much, but especially that era, like late 70s, early 80s, when that marketing really stepped up. You had Brooke Shields, and then you had that guy. He was an Olympic athlete, and he was something weird like pole vaulting, but he was like Greek god body, right? Like he was like in perfect shape. So he modeled on the side, and he was doing some modeling, and he got picked out of a crowd of some of the other models for Calvin Klein. Oh, they were both Calvin Klein. There you go. So yeah, this was also Calvin Klein, and this was her underwear. And like, so if you were like, he was on billboards in like these tight white Calvin Klein underwear, and like it caused such a sensation that like when they were put up in places, they put them on the side of bus stops and things, like women were breaking the glass and stealing the poster and taking it home with them.
Yikes.
Isn't that awesome? Now that's marketing. That's got to be a success. But it's funny too, because like the guy was modeling, but he was only doing it to fund like being an athlete. Like it wasn't like his passion to be a model or like that. Like, and like the whole thing kind of really embarrassed him. But
who was this guy?
I don't know his name. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Let's see if I can find him.
I'm just curious. I probably recognize what you're talking about.
I bet you've seen the picture they used.
I'm sure. I broke the glass and took the poster home, so I just don't remember his name.
Yeah, all right. Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah. I think a lot of things have a seedy history if you look hard enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of obvious with something like modeling, right? I believe his name was Bruce Weber. Yeah, Bruce Weber, Weber. Yeah, he was a pole vaulter. I mean, I get it. You have to be in shape to be a pole vaulter, but it's kind of not really what you would think of when you think of like a really, sculpted athlete. But I mean, I'm sure it doesn't hurt for pole vaulting. So yeah, I mean, he had like, yeah. But probably, yeah, and right up there, of course, if you want to talk about like abusing minors, there's gymnastics, right? I mean, Jesus Christ. How many like young girls, like gymnasts, were like getting molested by their coaches?
Oh yeah, a whole lot of that stuff's come out recently.
Yeah. And you have to think, like, sometimes when I find out about like a teacher or somebody like molesting the kids, I'm thinking like, how on earth are they getting like a window of opportunity for this? Like, this is risky as fuck. But when these gymnastics coaches, it's like tailor made for them. They like get to be alone with like the kid all the time.
It's sports, a lot of sports too, because
and they have like perfectly good reasons for putting their hands on them. They're like, your
Right.
hamstring needs to be stretched out, you know, all that stuff. Like, oh Jesus,
need to drop a few lbs and come in my office. I know that's the thing with gymnasts; they always tell them they're too fat, and probably ballet dancers as well. Like
virtually overnight, the billboard and the undisguised bulge in high-notice briefs made Weber the most visible iconographer of the 80s and established this particular type of buff as the new all-American idol. That's true, too. Like, the 80s was when that became big. I guess he was part of it. We think of the movies, too. Because, you know, you had guys that were in good shape up to that. But the 80s was when it became, you know.
Oh, yeah. Large muscles, yeah.
You know, you had, like, guys like Harrison Ford and Kurt Russell who were in good shape, but they weren't, you know, massively muscular. And then you had Arnold and Stallone come in.
You know, it almost seems like more of an infatuation with other men than women. Not a sexual thing, but a desire to look like that.
An ideal, right? An
yeah.
Ideal.
Like I want to look like that rather than. Because I mean, I've heard a lot of women say they don't like the big muscles like that.
Right, and I wouldn't either. But I mean, obviously, I could look better than I do. It's something to think about, I guess.
I'm into flabby dudes and tiny dicks. That's what I'm into.
I don't know. I've been on Tinder recently, and you'd be surprised how many girls seem to unironically say they're into dad bods, which is kind of scary.
Is that that's a gimmick, though, right?
I don't know. I don't know what to believe from these profiles and stuff. I have no idea. And I'm not just even talking about like the young ones that I would know nothing about. I'm talking about people in their 30s that I'm supposed to be able to relate to. They say stuff that I have no idea what they're fucking talking about.
They're like, they put their like, you know, your income desire, you know, got to be 6'3" to 6'3" and up, or
yeah.
you gotta
I hate the people that are overly. Yeah, it's too much. Like, there's nothing wrong with having. There's nothing wrong with having preferences, but I hate people that like act like, you know, this has to be, you know, like, I don't care how pretty you are. It doesn't mean you can just. I don't know.
Yeah, Jamie says that she's not into the big muscles.
Not nice to the touch. I've never really had an opportunity to touch big muscles, so I don't know. I mean, I've seen girls with like arms more muscular than me, and it is kind of hot, but I think that would just make me feel bad about myself if I was with them. You know, I'd be like, I appreciate that because, you know, it is kind of appealing, but yeah. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably the first, my earliest memory of hearing about like sort of like sexual assault thing is like being like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and we used to have a little TV in the kitchen. Actually, we still do all these years later, but we had a little TV in the kitchen that was playing the news. We were getting ready for supper, and the news was playing, and you know, nobody's watching. It was just on while we were getting our plates or whatever like that. And they were talking about a woman who was like bringing sexual assault charges against some doctor that had examined her, right? And I'm really young. I don't think I'd heard these terms before, but this is how you mishear things when you don't understand them. And she was saying at one point during it, he grabbed her hand and pushed it down onto her crotch. And the reporter said she felt an erection. But I didn't know the word erection. And I thought she said she felt an eruption. And that seemed to work just as well. It's like, it still conveyed the same idea to me. I was like, because I mean, I know that's where your penis is, obviously. It's like, oh, okay. So I got that it was something bad. But I did not know they said erection. I thought they said eruption. But it works. It works.
I think whenever that
was a doctor.
Whenever you've got someone in a position of power, no matter what it is, some predator is going to take advantage of it. Whatever their thing is, you know, whether it be kids or just, you know, sexually assaulting women or men or whatever, it's going to happen. It's just. Yeah.
And as I said, it's not because, and this isn't coming from a place of being so high and moral, although no, I would not sexually assault somebody. But honestly, coming from like a place like where, let's imagine I'm capable, I could sexually assault somebody. I think about my life and I think about, where the fuck could I have done it? I can't think of any moments where I'd be like, here's the opportunity. Like, I don't understand how these people are getting these opportunities. I mean, I guess, especially not now. It was such a solitary life. But anyway, there were plenty of times where I was around people and with people, but I was just like, when the fuck could I don't know. You know, I wasn't a camp counselor, but I worked at burn camp one year as support staff. But I still can't think of opportunities where, like, if I wanted to grab any of the kids, I could have. Like, somebody would have seen something. Like, obviously, it's not something I was thinking about, but I'm thinking, when I think back now, I don't see how I could have possibly done it. But people, I guess, if you really want something, you do it, right? Like, these people, they're sexual assaulters. They, you know, they're going to go for it.
They're good at what they do. They, you know, they're not going to do it somewhere where other people.
A certain amount of risk is worth it, I guess, or whatever. You know, I'm not trying to make excuses for some of these people. Be like, they can't help it, but I mean, probably some of them can't. You know, obviously, if they're going to do something so brazen, they probably have some real control issues. You know, I've seen plenty of attractive women close up in public, but I knew I couldn't just grab them. You know, but maybe some people think, oh, it's worth the risk. That's one of the weirder things in Japanese porn. Is a big theme of theirs is women being molested on, like, trains and buses. There's a lot of that. I mean, it's fake. You know, it's just girls.
Sure.
It's porn girls. They're not really. But that's a big one. Like, I don't go looking for that, but that comes up a lot. It's like, why? It'll be like scenes in
setting. I guess.
Yeah, and it is the real setting too, because they don't just have, like, porn actors. They have, like, you'll see, like, you know, I don't know, old women and stuff in the background because they want to make it look as real as possible. They have extras because they want to make it look as real as possible. And it'll start with, like, some attractive girl getting on, she's holding on, and then you'll be several guys eyeing her, and then it'll get more aggressive from there. They'll sometimes it goes into full blown sex and sometimes not. But, you know, and that's like a really popular thing, I guess.
It must be some sort of a public transportation thing where they take the train every day, and there's
I mean that's really what it. I mean, I realize that. Yeah, it's almost you'd say it's like wish fulfillment, except that they really do, like, want to push. It's like, she doesn't like this. It's not like she's like, oh, I'm enjoying the touch. Let's get on. Like, they have a real resisting thing. Again, it's not like full blown rape, but it's one of those, she doesn't like it and she's just sort of being forced into it type thing. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, oh, now everyone's having a good time. It's like, no, she doesn't like this, but she can't stop them, and their hands are everywhere. It's like, fuck. Yeah. Like, not cool.
That's the time when New York City, in a normal time, not necessarily during the pandemic, but New York City during Christmas time, there's a big problem with guys just like busting on women, like, in public, like, because it's such crowds, and apparently that's a big thing for some guys, is doing that.
Right. I mean, I can understand taking advantage of crowds. I mean, they talked about it at Woodstock, and I even saw it a little myself at some of the big outdoor concerts I was at. It's like, if a girl is, like, crowd surfing, it's a great time to grab her ass. I get that, people doing that.
Yeah. It's a shitty thing to do, but I get it.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I get it in that is a good opportunity, is what I mean. Like, she's gone, and you're just one in the crowd, there's no charges no one's going to kick your ass. It's quick. It's over. That's what I mean about opportunity.
Yeah. Well, she turns around, there's 10 guys there, so.
Yeah. But I remember a few months ago, I watched the entire set. I don't know why. I think it's because I just wanted to remember what that time was like. I watched the entire set by The Offspring from that. And at one point, Dexter, the lead singer, like, actually called them out on it. It's like, hey, he's yelling at them not to do that, which was pretty cool.
Was this at Woodstock?
Yeah, Woodstock 99. There's a good documentary about that on maybe HBO called like Peace, Love, and Rage.
It's fairly new, right?
Yeah, I really liked it. I forgot about the guy who died because they talked to, like, friends of the guy that died. But my favorite part of the documentary was, as a Canadian, there's this part where they interviewed quite a few artists that have played there. And the whole point is, it's like building up like that, it started off in a good place, but then it, kind of got out of control. Right. And one of the people they interviewed was Moby. Remember Moby?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Moby's a peace, love, douchey guy. Who's kind of a weird guy to be at there, right? Because Woodstock was all about, like, harsh, angry bands for the most part, right? So Moby already doesn't like this thing. And he said, like, from the moment he got there, he felt like something was just wrong or something like that, right? So then we get footage, so you can buy like Moby's crew or something, as they're driving in, like entering through, I don't know, the artist entrance or the back, right? And there's a big a big billboard thing that says like Woodstock 99 and has like all these bands list like their names on it, right? And they're stopping and they're looking at the band's names. And this is including bands, you know, that are lesser known and on like the smaller stage and stuff like that, right? So at one point, Moby is reading some of the band's names out loud. And one of the bands is Buckcherry. Remember those fuckers?
Oh, yeah.
And then one of the bands is Canadian band Our Lady Peace. And he goes, Buckcherry, Our Lady Peace. He's like, who are these people? Or something like that. So I love that Moby thought that he had a bad feeling about Woodstock because he hadn't personally heard of Our Lady Peace, which is pretty funny.
Is Moby Canadian?
No, God, no.
Oh, you guys can have it.
I know. He's insufferable.
He was.
No, I mean,
really
that's the
popular.
point. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, most Americans would not have heard of Our Lady Peace, particularly in 1999. You know, they were huge in Canada, but they were really only just kind of getting a little bit known.
No, I knew who they were. I knew who they were then.
In 99, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was really into music at that time. Like,
yeah, they were beneath Moby's notice anyway, and it gave him a bad feeling about the whole thing, which I find really funny.
Moby was huge when that was going on. That's probably the only reason he was there.
The only thing I ever liked about Moby was in the early 2000s, they had that really obnoxious, and again, everything in the early 2000s was obnoxious, right? And MTV put, you know, it was Jackass and Survivor and all that shit, right? And one of the more obnoxious things on MTV at the time was Cribs, right? Where they just show off their stuff. I liked the Moby episode of Cribs because he was the exact opposite of all these people. He was a douchey hipster-esque guy that was kind of annoying, but he was still way closer to my own taste than anybody else would be. He lived in like kind of a cool loft somewhere in New York City, and you know, he just had cool stuff. He didn't have opulent show-off stuff. You know, he had cool collector's stuff. Like, he showed his love for music and, you know, the history. So he had stuff like that. You know, he didn't have like a golden fountain or the shit that these other guys had. And it wasn't about him bragging. He was just showing the stuff he liked. So, I mean, I still think he's an insufferable douche in a lot of ways. But it was the one episode of Cribs I related to. I was like, yeah, I wish I could have that stuff. Where half the time, they're just like, here's our, jet ski garage.
It's my Shark Tank. He eats $2,000 worth of food a day.
Yeah. Here's my,
cars and dumb shit, yeah.
Everything shoots Mountain Dew. You know, all that really obnoxious early 2000 stuff. But that's the one thing I liked the Moby episode because it was just sort of like a quiet, not ostentatious, just sort of cool place with cool stuff in it. And I'm not like an electronic music fan at all, but he still had stuff I liked.
I remember the episode of Cribs. Like you said, most people will be showing off their possessions. And CeeLo was on there. And CeeLo's thing was like food. Like, he just showed off like his junk. He had like a massive like pantry. He's like, here's my fruit roll-ups. Here's my Cheetos.
I guess I like that honesty. You like that honesty. I mean, CeeLo was a fat guy, so at least he's showing, you know.
I mean, I get it. You know, he probably grew up in Atlanta, you know, relatively poor. And like, now I've got all the snacks, you know, anything I want, you know.
Yeah. I like that honesty. I mean, it's not very impressive. He has a lot of snacks, but I guess I like the honesty because it's not about showing off opulence and decadence and all that stuff.
I think he kind of played it. He played it for a joke, but
still, I mean, not bad for a one-hit wonder.
Canceled.
I forgot about that. I forgot about that. That is true. That is true. I mean, she wasn't super young, but she was still too young, you know. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like, well, I mean, what's the extreme? R. Kelly and Aaliyah.
Oh, yeah.
He married Aaliyah.
Yeah, I saw that one, Ben.
Yeah. But I mean, I saw some other Cribs, but they all sort of blend together in my mind who they were and what they showed. One of them was, some of them were really odd too. And it's just like bands that were big at the time that probably don't have any money now. Because one of them was, what are they called? They were one of those loud, angry bands. It wasn't Disturbed. It was, all their songs were about going away, get away. fuck. Their lead singer sounded like a construction worker, and his name was Sully. Literally.
Saliva?
That wasn't a... No, but it was like that. Fuck, this is gonna drive me nuts. It's like, get away, go away. It's like all their bands. I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I ever did. Yeah. Now go away.
Not Disturbed. Godsmack?
Godsmack. They were showing the lead singer of Godsmack's house once.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't believe he had as much money as he did. Because, like, he had a legit mansion. And, like, the opening hall was what you expect. Like, big staircase, but just massive space, high ceiling, right? And he had this gorgeous, probably like $60,000, maybe $100,000 grand piano that I don't even think he knew how to play, but he just had it there, and I like really hated him. I know he had other stuff in his rooms, but I just remember just like I couldn't believe it. Like when he opened the door, I was like, Jesus Christ, he's not like Billy Joel. What the fuck? And I don't mean because of the piano. I mean because of the money. Yeah, Godsmack. Because I was like, I get it. Godsmack were kind of popular, but I mean, how much money did they make in like a couple years while they were somewhat relevant, while everybody loved that really aggressive shit? I don't dislike it. It just, just sort of all blends together in me. Speaking of that, you remember a band called Trapped with a T at the end?
Yeah.
Apparently their lead singer is like some sort of like lunatic.
Yeah. Is it
like
the lead singer? I know one of them went really hard into politics.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's not just politics. Like he posts like really bizarre like conspiracy theory shit, which I guess ties into politics. You're right, but yeah.
Well, he got kicked out of the band for that too.
There you go.
Well, I'm doing the best I ever did. I'm doing the best that I can.
Now go. But he goes, go away. But that's just one song. I swear they had at least 3 or 4 other songs where he'd scream, stay away or go away or get away from me. Like that was a big part of their lyrics. I didn't hear their, and these were singles, right? I wasn't listening to their albums. These were ones that gave music videos and airtime, and they all had a go away, get away vibe.
I used to like some of those songs too.
Again, I mean, it's harmless. It doesn't make you an idiot. I mean, they were fine. They're still better than a lot of that pop stuff, I wanted more harsh, aggressive stuff than a lot of the pop stuff too. I'd take that over Christina Aguilera or whatever in 2003 or whatever was going on. Anyway, we're past 3 hours. I guess we can wrap up. We got to talk about a lot of stuff, which often happens when we haven't been around for a while because we missed a couple of weeks. But I mean, that's our 4th Cronenberg, so we didn't want to just repeat too much about Cronenberg. You can watch our other Cronenberg episodes for more in-depth stuff about his career and style. But this was always sort of a weird black hole for me because the movie kind of used to upset me. It doesn't upset me now, but I mean, not to agree too much with Audrey, but yeah, it's a movie I kind of respect and admire, but I certainly don't enjoy. I am not gonna watch it again, but I'm gonna look back and see if I'm right about those parts missing or anything like that, because I swear I couldn't see that scar. That scar you're talking about, I don't remember seeing it.
They linger on it for a little while.
Yeah, and I don't remember. So I'm gonna have to go back and try to see if I can find it, if it's in this version of the movie that's on Crave or what. I mean, you've got obviously the cool uncut version because you've got the thing. I don't remember Fear. I mean, I know Much Music in the 2000s basically just turned into MTV because we just switched our programming to a bunch of brain dead MTV stuff like that. But I don't remember Fear. What was Fear?
I don't know what Fear is either. Oh, MTV's Fear. Was that it was like a reality show where they would have cameras and night vision and shit. I think I remember some of that stuff.
Like, was it like a ghost hunting show?
They would just try to scare them, I think. It'd be like pitch black and they would just try to scare people, I guess. I don't think it was like intended to be like real ghost or anything.
Okay. I don't remember ever seeing it, but I did at least see some episodes of Cribs. They had a short-lived show I liked called like Duets, where like a super fan would do a duet with an artist they liked, because sometimes that led to some it was an interesting concept, but they didn't do too many episodes of it. But yeah. I mean, I don't go off on a tangent because we're wrapping up here, but the early 2000s was basically the whole 2000s was just obnoxious. What an obnoxious time. This reality TV and energy drinks and bands like that. And even bands that weren't necessarily in the angry genre. Like that's when emo became at its most obnoxious. It's basically the emo in the 2000s is almost completely unrecognizable from the emo in the 90s. They don't even you would never get, like, I wouldn't even put them in the same I wouldn't even put them in the same category. They changed so much. But yeah, it was just an obnoxious time. It's like Jackass, Punked. There's a good one. There's fucking Ashton Kutcher with a backwards hat running around going, "Oh, you idiot," you know. And it was also like the Raw, even though I am, we're both fans of MMA and obviously we're UFC fans, but that was sort of like the boom for UFC. So it was all guys like with tap out shirts and hats that looked like they'd never been worn, and again, all that other stuff, and all that really aggressive music like Drowning Pool and all that shit. Like, it was a really obnoxious time in a lot of ways, and we just endured it because whatever. Like I said, I didn't hate all of it at the time. It was okay, You just sort of, yep. It's funny now. Like, all my jeans were wide leg back then.
It's coming back. 20 years, dude. It's coming back.
I know. We're coming really close to all the people that are going to be nostalgic for the 2000s. I am in some ways, but it's more like just what my life was like, not like what society or styles were like. I'm like, I don't want to bring back those styles or things. I just miss, being that age. And, it was when I started college and all that stuff.
I'm just ready to start wearing Jinkos again.
What do those look like?
I'm ready. Oh, you don't know what Jinkos? You guys didn't wear Jinkos?
We might. I just don't recognize the name. I mean, I'm sure we copied whatever shit they did in the US. That's what we usually did.
Oh, look at these.
Is this the kind of jeans?
Yeah, it's a brand. I mean, there were a few different brands, but this is going to be good. If it would cooperate with me.
Yeah, and I made a weird transition from high school into my middle college years from like clothes that are over. Oh, yeah. I mean, I never wore anything like that, but yeah, they were around.
Yeah, they've been trying to bring them back for a few years now. I remember I could fit an entire carton of cigarettes in this back pocket right here.
Well, so they weren't just style; they were functional. There you go.
Look at that! Look how long that pocket is. Like, I put an entire carton of cigarettes in one.
I mean, I
have like a.
I had wide jeans, not that wide, but they did have like a lot of pockets. And one of the things I did was because I never wear things on my wrist. I hate stuff on my wrist, so I always refuse to wear a watch. So like in the 90s and early 2000s, I had a pocket watch, which worked really well with the kind of jeans I wore because I could wear it on my hip, but I had a pocket down for it to go into off the chain. So now they don't make jeans with pockets there anymore, which is fine because I haven't worn a pocket watch in a million years, but I did. I used to wear a pocket watch.
Oh, really? With the little pocket, right? Like in the jeans.
Yeah.
I never knew what that was for.
I don't think it's for that. It just worked out perfectly. It seemed to be the exact length I needed with the chain because I mean I didn't have to wear it balled up. I wore it stretched out down on my leg. But yeah. But even before that, like in high school, I always wore t-shirts that were like 2 sizes too big for me for some reason.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, one thing I do kind of miss, and I haven't had to do it because I'm in a better size and stuff, though, was like high school and even early college because I was underweight in college. I had that eating disorder and I was throwing up all the fucking time, which is why my teeth are ruined. But was that I wore stuff in layers. I never wore one t-shirt. Never.
Right.
I always wore at least 2 t-shirts. And then, as things would dictate, I'd wear more on top of it. I often wore layers. 3 shirts was a pretty normal thing for me. Maybe two t-shirts with a hoodie over it, or 2 t-shirts and some long sleeve shirt. That was another thing in 2000s. Remember they used to wear like, how would they do this? You'd wear a long sleeve shirt, but then you wear a t-shirt over it for some reason. I remember that. Like that was like on shows like the OC and stuff. They dress like that. I'd be like, don't they live in California? Aren't they hot? But I don't know.
Oh man, you're talking about terrible fashion. You remember when it was fashionable to have like a do-rag on and then a baseball cap over it?
No.
Early
I once
2000s.
expressed my ignorance about do-rags and that I thought they were only in prison. I didn't think people wore them out in the world. I thought it was like a prison gang thing. I did not see do-rag stuff.
You could match your whole outfit together with the do-rag and the hat and the shirt and the shoes. Yeah. Rap culture, I think.
An interesting part of living in Halifax is that there's to this day, and they could even be younger than me, some of them, they range in age, but there are people that dress like old school punkers from like late 70s, early 80s here.
Mhm.
Not a lot of them. I don't see them often, but I still see them. I'm just like, where are you getting these clothes? Like, you'd swear they just came from like a Misfits concert or something. I was like, that's not possible. Or they'd have, they'd have like the leather jacket that's maybe combined with a. You ever see that? It's like a leather jacket, but it's like combined with a denim jacket. It's some sort of like unholy union. It's full of patches and shit. We got people like that.
I don't think that shit's ever gone out of fashion though. Like since like the 70s, like that, the punk look, you know. I'm sure.
Well, I think the punk look has,
yeah.
I mean, it's evolved, but this is like the old school boots, skinny jeans, like jeans they don't make now. Not like these days skinny jeans. I mean, like really, like pale, sort of acid wash looking skinny jeans. Mm-hmm. And then jackets that they had to have made themselves. They didn't buy that jacket; they fucking made it, which is, I guess, cool. I guess I don't know. But as I said, I never care what people wear, but that doesn't mean I'm not ever surprised by what people wear. Sometimes I'm just like, wow, that's really what you know. I'm not anybody to judge, but I still every once in a while will see somewhere I'm like, that's really what you chose to go out in public as today. But whatever.
It seems like a lot of work too. I remember I went to London in '95, and I guess the punk scene was still big then there. But I saw tons of punks with like massive mohawks, just like so bright colors, and I was just like, I mean, I would never do it, but you know,
I'm like cool. You. I was low maintenance, which is one of the reasons why I never fell too hard into any one style, because I wasn't going to put effort into it. Like, I was the right age to be like goth, and I shared a lot of those sensitivities. You know, right. I was dark and sensitive and hated people and stuff, but I never really expressed myself that way because it seemed like too much effort. I hung out with goth people.
I hung out with goths that did the whole deal, the black lipstick with the like guys with the white, you know, they put white on their face and black lipstick.
Yeah, I knew a couple.
I mean, I did like eyeliner a couple times. I mean, that's about the extent of.
I wanted to, but I didn't. I wanted to, but I knew my friends would like call me a fag because I still had friends that weren't that, right?
I'm really putting myself out there for you guys tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a big admission. It's hard for me to admit. It's something I wanted to do, but I didn't do. The closest I ever did is I used to sometimes paint my nails silver, but I don't even know what that fits in. That was just sort of me being alternative, I guess. I mean, I always dyed my hair colors, but
yeah,
that was just. I mean, I've done that well into adulthood. I did that 2 years ago. I'm sure I'll dye it again because why not?
Yeah, I dyed mine a few months ago.
If Billy Joel Armstrong can still do it, he's like way older than me, so.
Yeah, that's my like. I guess not. I say midlife crisis, but that's assuming I'm going to live to 80. Come on, that's a little generous.
Yeah.
My post midlife crisis.
But I think that's the one thing that really saved me from never being completely dated or looking too ridiculous, was just like not caring enough to put the effort into it. So that my clothes, even though they've changed over the years as they always would, there's still sort of a sameness to them because it was just sort of simplicity. Jeans, t-shirt, hoodie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that's classic.
I mean, one thing that I like is flannel. I mean, I just was happy that it was big when it was big because of grunge and stuff, but I'm still... That's pretty impressive, Ben.
Yeah,
I've tried on girls' jeans by accident before, and that was embarrassing enough. I didn't actually walk out of the store with them. I tried them on before. I was like, this feels different. They definitely feel different.
You know, it was an episode of The Office. I don't know if you ever saw it, but Michael.
I've seen every episode of The Office except for the last one.
Okay, well, you definitely saw it. It's where he buys a like a sport coat or a blazer, or whatever you want to.
And it's a women's, and he keeps saying that it's unisex.
I never knew until I saw that the buttons were on the different side for women's stuff.
Oh, you didn't know the buttons thing? Oh, I didn't know that. I can't. My mother told me that many years ago.
I mean, what size is ours on the right, or our right?
Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Fuck, I can't even. I wouldn't even know the difference.
No, left.
Left? Okay.
Left. Yeah, left was always the straight male thing, right? Because I grew up, lots of guys had earrings, but an earring in the right ear was gay, is what they said.
Right, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
See,
that was a big deal in the 90s. Like I'm one of the only people I know that didn't have the one earring. I never wanted one. I didn't want one. I didn't want two. I like tattoos, but I don't like piercings. So.
I never like when New Kids on the Block came out, or when they were huge in the '90s. Like that's when guys started wearing earrings.
Yeah.
And when I got a little older, you know, I got my ears pierced, and I didn't know which one was the gay ear and which one wasn't, so I just did them both.
Yeah, makes more sense anyway. I think the one earring looks stupid. I don't care what ear it's on; it looks stupid. Think of like Harrison Ford, like in his 80s, going around with one earring.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Harrison Ford still wears that one earring.
Yeah, I know. But I just remember in the 90s, when I was in junior high, so this is mid-90s, like that was when 70s stuff came back. So a lot of the girls I knew wore 70s jeans and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Like bell bottoms.
Remember that episode? Not episode. Remember the show Dazed and Confused? There's a part where the girls are getting dressed and their jeans are like so tight, they're like lying down on the bed, and it's the only way they can like get them to zip up properly. Yeah. Like they can't do it sitting or standing. Like
that can't be comfortable. That can't be comfortable to wear, man.
Must be fucking awful.
But
yeah. But I mean, it's always jumps over a decade because like. And that was the first I was aware of it. The 90s, 70s stuff was considered cool, and that 70s show came out and became a big hit and stuff. And by the time you hit the 2000s, everybody who's older than me is going on about how great the 80s were. And, you know, then it was my turn. You know, we were just through my turn. The 90s was my thing. I will even be. I love him. I'm just saying. I can't believe it.
Is he still married to Ally
yeah, Calista Flockhart. You're right. That's right. She's Ally McBeal. You're right.
I was trying to say her real name. Said the wrong one.
It's time for that show to come back. All the others ones did.
It is. They've talked about it. Yeah.
There. Oh, of course. Oh, you just don't sit down afterwards. Jesus. Yeah, that's one thing I'll give. Like some guys have this commitment, but pretty much all girls have like that commitment to clothes. Like only certain guys, and I don't even mean gay guys. It's just me. Only certain guys might have that kind of commitment. Girls, it's just built in. It's like it's uncomfortable, but this is what we're doing. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, we're going to agree with you, Ben. Our formative years were the 90s, so you know. But that's about to become uncool, and like I said, in the next little while, people 10 years younger than us are going to talk about how great the 2000s were. As I said, I can relate in a way in that the early 2000s was when I started college and stuff, so I pine for being that age, but I don't pine for, you know, what was cool or popular back then.
So we're talking about people that were like born in 2000 that grew up in the 2000s that are now adults saying how cool the 2000s were, right? Is that how it works?
No, it'd be more like people born in the 90s.
Okay.
Because, you know, they're born in the 90s, but they don't remember the 90s that well. Just like I was born in the 80s, but I don't remember, you know, my memory of the 80s is very fuzzy because I was so young. So the 90s are my formative years. Yeah, these people be born in the 90s. So their formative years were the 2000s. So they're going to go on about how great the 2000s were. You know, if you just find some random like music video from like 2003 and you already see a million comments on it, people that are 10 years younger than me talking about how old they feel. But I mean, that's just part of it, right? It's like, I'm 28. I feel so old.
Yeah. I don't know, Jake. I could probably.
We don't have the time for this, but man, 90s cartoons and 80s cartoons were so different from each other. So different. Like night and day, which is cool. But anyway, we've gone way too long reminiscing.
That's true. We could talk about that.
We can add some of this to some other stuff. Hopefully we can do a live commentary and stuff too. Loosen some stuff up. But yeah, I knew this one would drag a bit just because it's been a while. But anyway, we did hopefully give some good analysis of the movie. I do like the movie, but I also don't like the movie, so it's very hard. But I would endorse it in that pretty much every movie Cronenberg has made is worth watching because they're definitely all unique and have a cool style. And he's a great director and fearless in a lot of ways because he'll take on subjects other people probably wouldn't want to. And this is a very weird, you can't even call it taboo because it's like you said, like does it even exist? But I guess the idea of it is at least taboo. Although, as we said, there's at least some people that are probably in some way turned on to this, although I don't know if they really have an outlet for it. But at least these people weren't sexually having sex with the cars themselves. But I don't know. It's not a movie to watch if you're in certain moods, I would suppose. But it's definitely worth a watch, like all of his. It would not rank high for me amongst Cronenberg's movies. I like a lot of others more. Really? Plus, I just have bad memories of this movie. But I can respect it. But it's not one I really like. But I'm glad I got to watch it again, even though I found it a little difficult. This is one of the few times I watched the movie. I watched half and then watched the other half the next day. I almost never do that. And I wasn't busy. I was just like, I think I'm done for now, which I don't really do with movies. I don't like to do that. I like to watch them all in one sitting if I can, even if they're super long. Even if it's 4 hours, I still don't want to break it up. But I just felt like that. That's pretty interesting, Jamie. The dark age of animation.
It's only an hour and 40. I mean, the uncut.
Oh, yeah, so. I know. Like I said, it wasn't feeling long to me. It wasn't like it felt long. It was just, kind of intense, I guess, is how it felt. I don't know. As I said, it's not as much as I remember. My memories are always worse than it actually was.
I feel like the NC-17 rating definitely hurt its performance.
Yeah, so many movies get that when they don't warrant it at all. I mean, does this movie really warrant that? I mean, isn't NC-17 the equivalent to what used to be rated X back in the day?
I'm not sure. I mean, probably before it existed. Yeah. Before that,
I mean, this movie could have been more graphic. I mean, it's true. It's one of the few movies that'll show full frontal female nudity, but again, it's still more pubic hair than anything else. Obviously, it's not pornographic, so there's no penetration. There's no penises shown.
There were no penises shown.
So. No penises shown. Like I said, if you want the very rare unicorn of an erect penis in a mainstream movie, you can watch his son's movie, Possessor. But it's quick. Oh, yeah. It's only for a frame or two, but it's there.
Oh man,
that's the other thing. That's definitely the rule. It's funny. I get why there's a difference between pornography and a normal movie, between actual sex and simulated sex. I get the differences and why they exist and why you don't act, normal actors to actually have sex. But I've never understood the erect penis rule, because you can show penises in movies and shows sometimes, like Game of Thrones.
Oh, is that right? But you can't show them erect.
You can't show them erect. Think of a movie that has it erect. Possessor's one of the only ones I can think of. I know that there's a blowjob scene in that awful Meg Ryan movie In the Cut, and you're like, how does that work? But it's just
not a real dick. It's fake.
Yeah, it's not a real dick, which is still a sexual act, though. I mean, a girl blowing a fake dick or a dildo or whatever, that is a sexual act. But I mean, I get it. It's still different than engaging with an actual actor, so I get it. So I mean, that movie technically has an erect penis, but it's not a real one. So yeah. So that remains sort of a no-no. Which I don't know. I guess it's fine. Sometimes when they show somebody's penis in a movie, there's no point to it anyway. But sometimes I will admit, I'm like, why wouldn't it be erect in this situation? Because sometimes it's right after the guy had sex. They did that all the time in Game of Thrones. They'd be humping away, and then they'd go and be, oh, it's over. And the guy would immediately be flaccid. Who was flaccid that quick? This doesn't make sense, Game of Thrones. Insulting my intelligence. But anyway, no, but I'm going to see it this week, Jamie. It's definitely my to-do. We talked earlier that when we were talking about great directors and how much I like Cronenberg, two of my other favorite directors have movies out right now that I'm going to see. One is Edgar Wright for Night in Soho, and the other is The French Dispatch by Wes Anderson. Yeah, I was saying to Jay before the show, I was going to go see the Titan movie or whatever when I was downtown because I was at the library and I was going to buy my ticket and come back, but then I just felt tired and didn't want to go back, so I missed my chance, which is too bad. But at the same time, I can't see every movie and I have to make choices, and I'm still supposed to see Dune with Ryan supposedly this week, so we'll see how that happens. But yes, I saw, Jamie, that you had done a reaction video to it. I haven't watched it because I don't know if there's spoilers or not, but I plan to watch that movie this week, hopefully, probably by myself. It's definitely on the to-do list. Love Edgar Wright. Love everything he's done.
I've heard good stuff, so I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm maybe try to go see it later this week. I don't know.
Yeah. But, so yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, it's definitely not a Cronenberg I hold in high esteem, but I still recommend it because of its uniqueness and because you really have to see these performances by these actors because it's pretty different from what most roles in movies call for, and you got to give it to the actors for going all in on it. Clearly James Spader and again, this is 90s. It's a little more risque to show some sort of male on male sexual stuff, but James Spader and Elias Koteas go for it. It wasn't as graphic as other scenes could have been, which again, I'm not sure what the choice was there, but still kind of risque for 1996, I would say.
Yeah, totally. I would say before its time with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
I definitely still going to read the novel. I'm going to track it down, just like I need to read. I want to read. Well, I've read High Rise. I read it many years ago, but I want to get it and read it again. And I want to, since I love the movie so much, I would like to read Empire of the Sun. So try to track down some of G Ballard's books. Very interesting author. Cool guy. And it's very obvious why this particular, like, that book would be like appeal to Cronenberg to do a movie on. Like it seems like something he would have come up with on his own if somebody else didn't, you know, the sex and car crashes thing. So that's pretty cool. So I guess that'll do it. But yeah, so that's our 4th Cronenberg movie. I'm sure it's not our last, but we try to space them out.
Yeah,
because there's definitely still some that I think would be interesting. As you said, I am leaning towards Naked Lunch, but we'll see.
Awesome.
So thanks a lot, guys, and thanks for bearing with us for a kind of a particularly long, scattered episode. But sometimes we just have other stuff we feel like blabbing about if it's been a while. Next episode will be more tight, I'm sure. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one, guys.